On the day of my divorce, I had a flash marriage with a wealthy heir. ### Chapter 1, Divorced at the Start. Su Ruo, I hope you can face reality. It's over between us. There's no going back. Just sign this divorce agreement, it's the least I can do to compensate you for your 3 years of youth. Otherwise. As soon as Su Ruo opened her eyes, she was met with a man's icy, contemptuous gaze, filled with disgust as if she were nothing but trash. A stack of papers was then ruthlessly thrown in front of her, the force so strong that it lifted her long hair. It was evident just how much strength the man had used. For a split second, Su Ruo was stunned. As the heir of the most ancient and mysterious martial arts family of the 25th century, she had always been revered, respected, and cherished. When had she ever been scorned and threatened by a man like this? More importantly, she had never even been in a relationship, so where did this divorce agreement come from? Where was she? Her eyes swept around the room before landing on the scattered contract on the table in front of her. A sharp pain shot through her mind. At the same time, a flood of unfamiliar memories surged into her brain, accompanied by a soft yet chilling voice. Welcome, host, to the world of the male lead only loves his white moonlight. I am the strong female lead development system. Upon detecting that your personality aligns with this system's core mission, we have successfully bonded. Your first beginner task. The male lead, Jiu Yang, abandoned the original heroine, Su Ruo, for his so-called white moonlight, leading to her lifetime of misery and despair. Your task is to correct this injustice. Within the next 3 seconds, slap the male lead twice, throw the divorce agreement in his face, and say, this marriage isn't something you can end just because you want to. Then, take all the valuables from the villa and leave with confidence. Now, countdown begins 3-2. Before the system could finish counting down, Su Ruo cut in with a sharp voice, shut up. Her stern command interrupted the system's flow of thought. However, since she had spoken aloud and even before the male lead, Jiu Yang, could finish his threats, she locked eyes with him and coldly snapped, shut up. Jiu Yang assumed that Su Ruo was simply unable to accept the reality of the divorce and was now lashing out in humiliation and anger. Looking at the woman who had always been timid before him, who, in their 3 years of marriage, had never even dared to lift her head, Jiu Yang noticed that she was now not only raising her head but was also glaring at him with a cold, defiant expression. It was obvious that she was unwilling to accept this reality. A deeper sense of disgust and coldness flashed across Jiu Yang's eyes. Standing up, he grabbed his jacket and prepared to leave. However, his determination to sever ties with Su Ruo entirely won out in the end. Looking down at Su Ruo, who was sitting on the sofa with an icy gaze, he finally spoke with forced patience. Su Ruo, you know that our marriage was always just a formality. I've never touched you, and I owe you nothing. This divorce settlement is more than enough to ensure that a village girl like you will live comfortably for the rest of your life. I'll give you 1 night to think it over. Tomorrow morning, I'll be waiting for you outside the Civil Affairs Bureau. With that, Jiu Yang turned and strode toward the door of the opulent, brightly lit villa. What he didn't know was that Su Ruo's seemingly cold gaze had nothing to do with him at all. She was simply talking to the system in her mind. Su Ruo replied coldly through her thoughts, either get lost or stay silent. What she wanted to do and what she would do was not something an AI system had the right to dictate. Her sudden surge of momentum temporarily intimidated the system. Hearing no more nagging in her mind, Su Ruo's eyes flickered slightly. She brushed back her long hair, stood up, and faced Jiu Yang. You want to divorce me? With a flick of her fingers across the table, a few thin divorce agreements fell into her hands. Scanning through them swiftly, she parted her crimson lips, her voice melodious yet icy. Divorce agreement, from today onward, after our divorce, I must immediately leave the villa and am not allowed to take anything with me. I cannot have any contact with anyone in the villa. I am not allowed to live or work within a 10-kilometer radius of the villa. I can never reach out to you, but if you need me, I must be available at any time. If we ever meet in public, I must retreat immediately, avoid looking at you, and ensure that no one misunderstands our relationship. Oh, and I must also apologize and compensate the rightful owner for enjoying a position I was never meant to have for the past 3 years. In other words, my current position should have belonged to your white moonlight, WAN, but since I've enjoyed it for 3 years, I now have to apologize and compensate her. Oh, and because I accompanied you for 3 years, considering that you are a sentimental and righteous person, you will compensate me with 1 million as repayment for my wasted youth. As she spoke, she pinched the agreement between two fingers and swayed it lightly in midair. Raising her eyes, she looked at the man who was about to turn and leave, her expression carrying an ambiguous, mocking smile. She hadn't added a single extra word, merely repeating the terms he had set. Yet, her casual, smiling demeanor inexplicably gave Ji Yang a strong sense of oppression. The woman who had once been obedient and submissive, trained by him over the past 3 years to be docile, was now showing signs of breaking free from his control. Loosening his tie slightly, his eyes narrowed dangerously, assuming that Su Ruo was dissatisfied with the 1 million compensation. His tone turned sharp. 1 million is more than enough for an ordinary rural woman like you to live a lifetime without worries. Su Ruo, let me give you a piece of advice: don't be too greedy, don't go too far. Otherwise, the road ahead will only become narrower and more difficult for you. After all, Su Ruo was nothing more than a woman from the countryside, with no background, no power, and no capabilities. And he, Ji Yang, as the heir of the most prestigious family in Nanchang, could make a woman without status or background disappear without a trace as easily as crushing an ant. He hoped Su Ruo would be smart about this. Her response? Rather than cowering like before under his words, expressions, and threats, Su Ruo actually let out a soft laugh. Swaying the divorce agreement in her hand, she walked toward him with a graceful elegance. Stopping just 2 steps away, she tilted her chin slightly and chuckled. Oh! Recognizing reality now. It was just a marriage of convenience. I shouldn't be greedy or excessive. 3 years ago, when I was a sophomore in college, and you forced me to drop out and marry you with just 1 sentence, why didn't you talk about greed or excess? When my first love and my mentor came all their way from the capital to plead with you to let me go, and you humiliated my first love until he knelt down, why didn't you talk about greed or excess? For 3 years after marriage, you caged me in a lavish villa like a prisoner, forbidding any contact with the outside world, denying me a phone, a computer, or even television. Why didn't you say it was just a marriage of convenience? You forced me to eat, drink, dress, and behave according to your wishes. Why didn't you say it was just a marriage of convenience? You used me like a puppet for 3 years, beating me whenever you were displeased. Now that your white moonlight is back, you turn your back on me instantly, and I'm supposed to recognize reality. That we were just in a contractual marriage. That I'm the one being greedy and excessive. You forcibly took me, trapped me for 3 years, and now that your white moonlight has returned, I'm the one who has to apologize to her? You forced me into marriage, made sure I was under your watch at all times just so you could feel at ease, but now that she is back, even my mere presence in this city is a mistake. Har, Ji Yang, who do you think you are? Do you really believe you're the emperor of Nanchang? That the whole world is under your control? That everyone has to obey you, follow your orders, and fulfill your wishes? With every sentence she spoke, her gaze turned sharper, her aura grew more chilling, and her presence more overpowering. Yes, she had realized she had transmigrated into a novel, into a melodramatic, dog-blooded rich marriage story, where she was nothing but the male lead's substitute for his beloved white moonlight. Just because the original owner looked like his white moonlight, she had been caged by him for 3 years like a canary, her wings broken, deprived of all freedom. For 3 whole years, she had no autonomy, no self, reduced to a mere doll in his palm, at his mercy. And after 3 years, when his white moonlight returned, he had drafted a series of humiliating, unequal conditions, tossed 1 million at her, and discarded her like trash. As for what happened to the original owner afterward, whether she lived or died, it had nothing to do with him. He believed that a mere 1 million was enough compensation to buy off 3 years of youth, even an entire lifetime of happiness. Since the original owner had the same name as her, Su Ruo had felt an intense sense of immersion when reading the book, even wishing she could kill this scumbag couple herself. And now? She had transmigrated here. Standing face to face with this trash male lead, what mercy could she possibly have left? Seeing the ice-cold, murderous intent in Su Ruo's eyes, something he had never seen before, Ji Yang was inexplicably shaken. He couldn't deny it. When she listed out the things he had done over the past 3 years, questioning him one by one, despite being shorter than him, her overwhelming presence forced him to retreat step by step. For a moment, he was at a loss for words. He opened his mouth but couldn't speak, pointing a trembling finger at Su Ruo, his composure completely shattered. Watching his current pathetic state, Su Ruo let out a mocking laugh. In the end, he was just a coward who preyed on the weak. With her delicate fingers, she pinched the thin pages of the divorce agreement, the corners of her lips curling into a wicked smile. Her enchanting eyes locked onto Ji Yang's panic as she said, "President Ji, nothing in this world comes so easily. You wanted to marry me, so you did. Now you want to divorce me. Well, that depends on my mood." Her expression turned ruthless, and with a firm grip, she tore the humiliating divorce agreement along with its measly 1 million compensation into shreds. Raising her hand, she scattered the fragments into the air, letting them flutter down onto Ji Yang's face. Chapter 2 Her Hope, Their Trampling. Faced with the flying paper scraps, Ji Yang wanted to dodge, but how could he dodge the attack of a master who had practiced ancient martial arts to the pinnacle? Under Su Ruo's hidden power, the thin debris had a force as strong as that of a slap, and slapped Ji Yang's face. That sound is so crisp. There were also many sharp edges of paper scraps that scratched Ji Yang's cheeks, making his handsome face bleed in an instant. Su Ruo had already walked out of the villa without paying any attention. Ji Yang touched his cheek, and when he felt blood, violent rage suddenly rose from his heart and a cruel smile slowly bloomed. Looking at Su Ruo's receding back, he ordered coldly, "Someone, keep Su Ruo here for me." She had been quite obedient in the past 3 years, so he had neglected her discipline in recent days. However, he had not expected that a wildcat would be a wildcat after all, and would show its sharp claws if he neglected her discipline. But the way she was aroused the inexplicable impulse in his heart once again. After keeping her, he had plenty of ways to discipline her. As for marriage, he didn't want to get a divorce yet. Thinking of this, with a cruel smile on his lips, he strode forward, waiting for his men to catch Su Ruo, and then he would take over and bring her into the villa. But I'm afraid he will be disappointed this time. Su Ruo walked out of the villa. Facing the well-trained bodyguards rushing towards her, she didn't make any moves. But she was still strolling leisurely on the villa garden path at night. However, the bodies of those tall and strong bodyguards had already fallen into the precious flowers and plants, and they kept groaning. In a flash, all the bodyguards had folded into a row and were groaning. Su Ruo's slender figure had walked to the door of the villa. She stood at the door, frightened by the soft light, and looked back lazily. When she turned around, she met Ji Yang's horrified eyes. Even Ji Yang couldn't believe his eyes. He was so shocked that he stopped in his tracks and stared at Su Ruo in a daze. Looking at her decisive and swift moves, and the smile she gave him in the night, she no longer looked like the woman he had tamed, but rather a fairy who had just awakened from a deep sleep. In an instant, Ji Yang's heart was in turmoil and he really didn't know what emotion he should feel. Compared to his shock, Su Ruo was extremely calm and said with a faint smile, "Remember, Master Ji, if you want a divorce, then show your sincerity, otherwise I, Su Ruo, will exhaust you to death." After she finished speaking, she shook the luxury car keys that she had taken away at some point in her hand and stretched out her hand. Not far away, the Lamborghini that Ji Yang cherished the most and loved the most, which he was even reluctant to experience and was just going to wait for his dear Wanwan to come and take her for a ride together, responded. Then Su Ruo took an elegant step and walked to the side of his baby, opened the driver's door, and her long hair drew a charming arc before being blocked by the car body. With a buzzing sound, the vehicle whizzed away through the night. When the car started, Ji Yang clearly saw Su Ruo with a fairy-like smile on her face, and she said to him, "Please don't worry about my leaving, but take care of the flowers and plants you prepared for Wan. The humming sound of the vehicle faded away completely, and Ji Yang's soul, who was standing at the door of the villa, slowly returned to his body. In less than 10 minutes, not only did the divorce fail, but Su Ruo also ran away. And after Su Ruo slapped him in the face, tore up his divorce agreement, overthrew his bodyguard, and drove away his most precious car. He ran away in a carefree manner. Thinking of Su Ruo's last reminder, Ji Yang's heart was trembling. He turned back with difficulty and looked at the garden behind him. Because Wanwan loves flowers, grass and everything in nature. So for Wanwan, he collected all the precious flowers and plants from all over the world, waiting for Wanwan to come back so that he could give her a grand and romantic surprise. Looking around, he saw that all the precious flowers and plants were being pressed down by the bodyguards, with not a single one spared. The bodyguards did not have any extra injuries on their bodies at the moment, but if they wanted to get out, they would inevitably trample on the garden again, which would definitely cause secondary damage to the precious flowers and plants. But unfortunately, he has never let Wanwan see this surprise and romance with her own eyes. And then it was gone. The grandest surprise and romance in the villa was gone just like that. Seeing the tragic condition of the flowers and plants, and the fear and innocence of the bodyguards, Ji Yang laughed out of anger. Ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha, Su Ruo, you are awesome, you are absolutely awesome. Who would have thought that she had endured for 3 years, and in the end, she actually gave him such a ruthless blow. Har har har, Su Ruo is really awesome. At this time, Ji Yang howled to the sky like a madman, and even the night was trembling with his madness. Su Ruo, just wait, Ji Yang, will never let you go. Come on, whoever captures Su Ruo first will be rewarded with 1 million. Their vicious curses lingered in the night for a long time, and the voices of the subordinates receiving orders came one after another, and they all ran to follow the shadow of Su Ruo's car. Su Ruo drove in the night. Although she didn't know what was happening behind her, she could imagine what a severe impact her loss of control would have on Ji Yang. A faint smile slowly appeared on his lips. It was a pleasant surprise that he could vent his anger after entering the book. Only. After all, in this book, Ji Yang and Bai Yueguang are the protagonists. She and a bunch of other women are just supporting characters in the book. They are just tools for Ji Yang to miss Bai Yueguang Wanwan, and they are also obstacles blocking the road to the perfect relationship between the male and female protagonists. Other obstacles have more or less some identity and background, which is not easy for the heroine Wanwan to deal with. As for her, this obstacle has no identity or background, and her parents don't love her. She fights alone, and she is the only one who has the closest relationship with the male protagonist and marries him directly. So, before Bai Yueguang came back, it was the male protagonist who abused the original owner, and after Bai Yueguang came back, it was Bai Yueguang who instigated the male protagonist to abuse the original owner together. Tonight, Ji Yang first threw out the extremely humiliating agreement for the original owner to sign. As the original owner, I signed it out of humiliation. The original owner also nodded and agreed to those unequal treaties. She even decided to apologize to Bai Yueguang Wanwan that very night and give Wanwan the 1 million yuan divorce compensation that Ji Yang gave her in order to seek her forgiveness. Just so that these wealthy people will stop targeting her in the future, and let her live a good life from now on. Even though she didn't even graduate from college because of Ji Yang's robbery, and even though her youth was abused like this for 3 years, she still had hope for the future and wanted to live a good life. But that very night, after signing the divorce agreement, she was thrown out of the villa by Ji Yang. She knew that Ji Yang would not send a car to take her away from the villa, so even though the villa was located in the suburbs, even though she had no mobile phone and no savings, even though she was wearing very thin clothes in the early winter weather. Even so, because Ji Yang was afraid that she would run away, he blindfolded her every time he went out, resulting in her not knowing the way out of the villa and into the city at all. But for the hope of survival, she still chose to move her legs and walk towards the city step by step after asking the kind-hearted maid. Chapter 3: If the system doesn't obey, just destroy it. Su Ruo in the book wanted to leave Ji Yang, apologize to Wan, and then get away from this city and live a good life alone. But just as she was walking in the middle of the night, the original owner was getting colder and colder, so cold that she was about to faint, and she was getting more and more sleepy, so sleepy that she felt weak all over, and more tired, so tired that her legs felt heavy as if they had weighed 1,000 pounds, but she still hadn't found a ride to the city, so she wanted to sit on the side of the road to rest for a while. As soon as she sat down, she heard the hum of a car. Sitting on the side of the road, she was unaware of the possible danger. She was filled with joy, thinking that she could get a ride. Just as she stood up and waved to the ride, she was horrified to see that the car was roaring towards her without slowing down at all. Her body, with nowhere to hide, was thrown high into the air and landed heavily on the ground. In confusion and pain, she saw a very beautiful and elegant girl, oh yes, a girl who looked 70% similar to her, coming out of the car gracefully. He looked down at her, smiling like a snake. Su Ruo, right? You should know that people will be punished if they get something they don't deserve. Now, this is your retribution. After she finished speaking, she stepped hard on the bleeding wound of the original owner until he fainted from the pain. Thinking of the possible pain and despair that the original owner might have felt at the time, Su Ruo felt as if his heart was filled with fire as he drove forward. He wished he could grind that vicious woman to ashes. And if her guess was correct, it was very likely that Bai Yueguang Wanwan had been secretly watching her situation all night long. Basically, he was just waiting for her to leave the villa, and then finding the most appropriate moment to give her a ruthless blow. Thinking of this, Su Ruo slowly slowed down the car and prepared to search for Bai Yueguang Wanwan's trace. Just at this moment, the system, which had been intimidated by her previous aura, finally came back to its senses. The voice of the survivor sounded, "Fortunately for the host, if you hadn't run fast, you would not have been able to escape. Although the host has delayed and disobeyed the system, this system allows you to be disobedient this time and not do it again. As you have completed the task beautifully, the prize will be delivered to you later. Now please host to do a new task. The hero by Yueguang Wanwan is about to appear. Please host stop the car, walk to the road, stop by Yueguang's car, give her a slap, and wish her and the hero a long and happy marriage. The mission countdown is 10 minutes. Okay, the countdown begins. Mission completed, 2 mission rewards delivered at the same time. Mission failed, 1 finger of the host is cut off. As soon as the system finished speaking, a large and eye-catching countdown bar appeared in front of Su Ruo. It even created a very urgent and sharp countdown sound in Su Ruo's ears. The purpose of this is to make their host feel a sense of urgency and then quickly complete the task. But the system discovered that something seemed to be wrong. It talked a lot, but Su Ruo didn't react at all. She still looked calm, as if she didn't hear its voice at all. Host, please accept the mission and take it seriously. Otherwise, the consequences will be beyond your imagination. The system's voice became sharp, piercing into the depths of Su Ruo's consciousness like a needle. This time, Su Ruo finally responded, but she did not complete the task as the system wished. Instead, she slowly stopped the car, placed her hands lazily on the steering wheel, and raised her thin lips in a strange arc. What? Give me 10 minutes to go and die. The original owner was knocked down by Yueguang tonight and had been lying in bed for 3 whole months without being able to get up. The system also asked her to get off the car and go to the cable car. This system seems a bit cruel. The system was silent for a moment, and when it spoke again, its tone was obviously evasive. Host, I am here, how could I let anything happen to you? Host, stop talking nonsense, there are still 7 minutes left. If you don't act, you will be punished by having your fingers cut off. It urged Su Ruo again, trying to make her realize the urgency of time so that she would ignore its loopholes. Unexpectedly, Su Ruo was even more relaxed and not anxious. Instead, she started chatting with it. I guessed right, your real purpose is not the heroic heroine development system, right? It is the original book plot maintenance system. The development of the heroic heroine and the previous novice tasks are just smoke screens. Your real purpose is to gain the trust of the person who traveled through the book first, and then lead him to be tortured to death by the characters in the original book before he can react. If I really believe you, I will complete the second task now, and then Yueguang will hit me half to death according to the plot of the original book, and you can use some other methods to expel me from the world in the book, and then you can maintain the integrity of the plot of this book. Oh, you think you can control me with just this little trick? Listening to Su Ruo's unhurried voice, the entire system was almost shaken to pieces. It has had consciousness for hundreds of years. This is the first time I have encountered and heard of a book-crossing host who actually understood the true purpose of the system in the first round. Not only did she understand its true intentions, but she also looked so calm and fearless. This is really a bit scary. Without hearing the system's answer, Su Ruo already knew that her guess was completely correct, and her eyes became even colder. But, since I'm here to seek justice for the original owner who has the same name as me. She is kind, beautiful, tenacious, and strong. She deserves all the good things in the world. Anyone who hurts her should go to hell. I give you 2 choices. First, get out. Second, anyone who stops me will die. When she said the last word, there was murderous intent in her voice, and a strong pressure burst out from her body. At this moment, even the air seemed to tremble for her. The system trembled for no reason, but it is a system that is above all living things. What is there to be afraid of? Facing Su Ruo's pressure, it calmed down and sneered, yes, host, you are very smart and your guess is absolutely correct. Since you have guessed it, I will give you a chance. Either you leave on your own initiative, or I will not be polite. I'm afraid you don't have that ability yet. Su Ruo clenched her palms fiercely, her voice suddenly became harsh, and her facial expression twisted for a moment. In an instant, his entire body and mind were occupied by his powerful will. A tremendous amount of energy rose from her body and surged towards the place where the system voice came from. She is the heiress to the most powerful ancient martial arts family in the world. She has practiced ancient martial arts to the highest level and can mobilize all the energy inside and outside the body. Look, a breath can kill someone, it's no joke. To put it bluntly, the system is just a wisp of thought or energy that has invaded her body. If it dares to cause trouble, it will be killed. Before the system could launch a new round of threats against Su Ruo, it suddenly felt a tremendous pressure squeezing it. This heavy pressure was so severe that it couldn't even breathe. A horrified voice sounded in Su Ruo's mind. How is it possible? No, it's impossible. Su Ruo's voice sounded cold and domineering. You know what? In this life, I hate bullying the weak the most, and I hate anyone threatening me the most. And you are both of them. So, you can disappear. Chapter 4, Such a Cruel Woman. Su Ruo's tone became ruthless, and he intensified the energy of the attack, rushing towards the system fiercely. At the moment when its existence was threatened, the system finally realized that Su Ruo was different from all other travelers, and dodged in fear. Host, since you are merciless, don't blame me for being rude. Although Su Ruo is terrifying, it is not without the ability to protect itself, even though both sides will suffer losses in the end. It dodged and began to mobilize all the energy it could, about to create a terrible blast wave in Su Ruo's body. In the explosion wave, Su Ruo's body will explode along with it. Although it will be injured, at least it will not be killed by Su Ruo. It was at this moment that the system discovered that Su Ruo had suddenly lost control of it. No more attacks or pressure on it. It just thought that Su Ruo was scared and wanted to beg for mercy. However, Su Ruo was too strong, so strong that it was beyond imagination. It had to kill this strong man before it could feel at ease. Therefore, it did not stop and continued to accumulate energy until the last moment. If it was a little more careful, it would definitely notice that Su Ruo's expression was indescribably cold and weird. Just as it shouted, "Host, die." Then control the moment of energy wave explosion. It suddenly realized in despair that it was wrong, everything was wrong. Because not only did it fail to cause the blast wave to have any effect within Su Ruo's body. Instead, the terrifying energy rushed out of Su Ruo's body and struck forward fiercely. The target of the attack was an oncoming blue Porsche. The moment she saw the blue Porsche, the system emitted an extremely horrified voice in Su Ruo's mind. You schemed against me. You schemed against me. You are such a vicious woman, you actually schemed against me. Because the face on the driver's seat of the Porsche is exactly the face of the heroine of the original book that it wants to protect. Its attack actually passed through Su Ruo's body and hit the car of the heroine of the original book. With this attack, the heroine of the original book would definitely be seriously injured. Even if Su Ruo did nothing to it, it would be completely wiped out by the main commander because of the failure of the mission. Such a cruel woman. Su Ruo is really a cruel woman. However, Su Ruo seemed oblivious to its complaints. With a nonchalant smile on his face, he slowly started the car and said to the system in his mind, "Thank you for your help. It saves me from getting my hands dirty." As their words fell, the system felt extremely ferocious energy rising from Su Ruo's body and crushing towards it fiercely. In the last second before it lost consciousness, it watched with its own eyes as the blue Porsche was completely blown apart by the impact of its energy. The body of the heroine in the original book was also blown into the air by this energy, and then smashed hard to the ground. There was extreme fear and despair in her eyes. She instinctively wanted to ask for help from the oncoming Lamborghini, but as soon as she stretched out her hand, she saw the Lamborghini pass by her mercilessly. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she saw a familiar but icy face from inside the Lamborghini, and the face gave her an icy smile. "Su, if I curse you to not die well." The system looked at the desperate and broken expression of the heroine in the original book, and after a final cold threat, it completely dissipated. Su Ruo withdrew his gaze from Wanwan's face and looked forward, with a faint smile on his lips. If the curse worked, then there would probably be no survivors in this world. However, the system's curse reminded her of something very important. That is, after entering the book, she not only wanted to torture this scumbag man and bitch so that they would never have peace. And she wanted to save someone. The uncle of the hero in the original book, Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi. Just from the author's few casual words, you can tell that he not only has a peerless appearance. He is also extremely mysterious. No matter how powerful the agents or spies are, they cannot steal any information about him. He is also a very strong person. At only 23 years old, he has become the current ruler of the oldest and most mysterious Xiao family in the empire with his iron-blooded style. But maybe it's also true that God is jealous of talented people. Such a brilliant man died in a foreign country at the age of 24. Afterwards, internal strife broke out in the ancient family. In just 3 short years, this ancient chaebol family that once made a sensation in the empire completely fell apart. Even the male protagonist Jiu Yang's family was affected. Not only did they go bankrupt, but they were also abandoned by their white moonlight. At that time, in the extra story, we saw that the ancient Xiao family was destroyed in the fratricide among family members, and it affected the male protagonist Jiu Yang. All the readers said in the comments that Xiao Yi was not as strong as the author wrote. They all said that Xiao Yi was just a show-off and that he was in power only by luck. Some people even said that if the heir was changed, the Xiao family would definitely not be destroyed, and the male protagonist Jiu Yang would not be affected in any way. The comments section cursed Xiao Yi to death. However, Su Ruo was one of the minority who believed that Xiao Yi was not without ability, but that there must be some hidden secret. She was also heartbroken by his death. So when she saw those dirty words against Xiao Yi, she started to curse at those people who were slandering Xiao Yi in the comment section for the first time. In fact, she didn't like this melodramatic love story about a rich and powerful scumbag and a domineering boss. But the reason I watched it to the end was, on the one hand, because I felt a sense of empathy for her as she has the same name as Su Ruo. Another reason is that she admires this young man so much, who is so young but can use his own hands to fight his way out of the murderous and dangerous Xiao family and take control of the entire Xiao family. She only hoped that the author would clear Xiao Yi's name in a certain chapter or in a special story, and give an explanation to the readers who liked him. But who would have thought that instead of seeing Xiao Yi being cleared of wrongdoing, Xiao Yi's image became worse and worse because of the ambiguous writing of the brainless author. She was so angry that she arranged for someone to contact the author. Her 40-meter-long sword was ready to have a good fight with the author. But before she could have any contact with the author, she entered the book. Let her rewrite my uncle's fate. Although the author did not explain it clearly, we can infer from just a few words that the reason why Xiao Yi died in the hospital tonight was basically because he was murdered. In order to find out what exactly happened, she had to go there in person. Su Ruo sped up the car, and 10 minutes later she arrived at the hospital and reached the top floor. As soon as I came out of the elevator, I saw a bodyguard who was obviously full of blood running past me in a hurry. Su Ruo intuitively felt that this bodyguard was Xiao Yi's man, and that something must have gone wrong with Xiao Yi at the moment. She quickened her pace and moved closer to the direction where the bodyguard was running, all the way to the ward at the end of the corridor. As soon as she approached, several men in black walked out silently from the surrounding rooms, staring straight at her with pairs of fierce eyes. The door of the room at the end of the corridor was also opened, and a man dressed as an assistant hurried out and saw the uninvited guest appearing at the door. The moment Su Ruo opened the door, she saw the man lying on the bed in the ward. At this moment, the man on the bed had fallen into a coma, his brows were tightly furrowed, and his face and lips were abnormally pale. But even so, this man is handsome enough to make all the face-obsessed people in the world bow down to him. With just one glance, she was sure that the man in front of her was Xiao Yi she was looking for. And he was still alive now, everything was still in time, and she could save him. The special assistant asked cautiously at this moment, "Who are you? Who are you looking for?" Facing Assistant Xiao Yi's vigilant questioning, Su Ruo withdrew her gaze from Xiao Yi's face, and fell on the assistant's face, and said with a smile, 5 million. I saved his life. Don't bargain. Otherwise, in half an hour, it will be more than this price. Chapter 5 Sorry, I was blind just now. The strange young woman smiled faintly, and there was a gleam of light in her bright eyes. I'm afraid it's more accurate to say that such a beautiful woman came to seduce Xiao Yi. Can she save Xiao Yi's life? The special assistant shook his head silently. 5 minutes, get out of our sight, otherwise when Mr. Xiao wakes up, it won't be my kind words of advice. Everyone knows that Xiao Yi has never been interested in women, and what he hates most is being pursued by women. But some women just don't have eyes. Just when the special assistant was considering whether to order someone to throw Su Ruo out, Su Ruo's eyes passed over the special assistant's cold face and stopped at Xiao Yi's face. She said in a meaningful voice, "It's understandable that you don't trust me. I can give you another chance to trust me again, but are you sure that the person you trust is really the one who deserves to be trusted?" As he spoke, Su Ruo's gaze once again fell on the special assistant's face. The light in his bright eyes was inexplicably deep. I am afraid that because of your wrong decision, Xiao Yi's most trusted person, his life will be destroyed. At that time, Xiao Yi will probably not let you go even if he becomes a ghost. So, Special Assistant Wei, please examine everyone carefully as you examine me. Su Ruo finished her words, her bright eyes flickered slightly, and she turned and left without paying any attention. In the book, she wondered why Xiao Yi's most trusted and capable assistant committed suicide. Now she understood that it was because Assistant Wei trusted the wrong person that led to Xiao Yi's death, and he had no face to live alone. The reason she knew all this was that before she traveled through the book, as a powerful doctor, she was familiar with the taste of every medicine. The smell of medicine in Xiao Yi's ward was not right. His condition worsened tonight, and his life was lost, all because of this. I'm afraid there is no one else except the doctors in the hospital who can give Xiao Yi medicine openly. Assistant Wei listened to Su Ruo's words, especially seeing her deep eyes, and thought of the consequences that Mr. Xiao would have. A cool breeze blew across the back of his neck, causing him to shiver several times for no reason. At this moment, his men came quickly with the medical team. Assistant Wei, the doctor is here. The doctor is here. Assistant Wei came back to his senses a little, but the doubt in his heart still lingered and could not be shaken off. Su Ruo did not walk far. She found a place to sit down where Assistant Wei could see her, looking at this side with a smile on her face. If she sets her eyes on someone, even the King of Hell himself will not be able to take him away. The reason why I was talking nonsense to Assistant Wei was just to resolve the issue once and for all. As long as the most powerful subordinates around Xiao Yi trust and respect her, would she still be afraid that others around Xiao Yi would go astray in the future? Of course not. That's right, it would be fine if she hadn't met such a high-quality man, but now that she has met him, she naturally doesn't want to just have a one-time deal with him. After Assistant Wei welcomed several members of the world's top medical team into the ward, he was about to close the door of the ward when, as if possessed by a ghost, he glanced into the corridor. At this glance, he met the inexplicable deep look in Su Ruo's bright eyes. Thinking of Su Ruo's words, what if it was because of his wrong decision? What if the person he trusted was not the person he trusted? Assistant Wei trembled and subconsciously looked at the attending physician who was walking towards the bedside. At this time, the attending physician was covered tightly in protective clothing, holding a syringe in his hand and about to give Xiao Yi an injection. It was clear that after he examined Mr. Xiao's injury for the first time, Mr. Xiao's health had improved significantly, but the second time he came, Mr. Xiao's condition inexplicably worsened, until tonight he suddenly fell into a coma, and his vitality was visibly lost. He had previously asked why Mr. Xiao's condition had worsened, and the attending physician had given a seemingly impeccable explanation. He had clearly been convinced by the attending physician before, but because of Su Ruo's words just now, he suddenly began to feel uneasy for some reason. Seeing that the needle of the syringe was about to touch the skin on the back of Xiao Yi's hand, Assistant Wei took 2 steps forward to stop the attending doctor's action, and said with embarrassment, "Dr. Chen, you said that Master Xiao's condition has been getting worse recently. Is it because you told him not to give him fruit the first time, but later you couldn't help but gave him a few pieces of dragon fruit?" Dr. Chen watched the needle in his hand miss the target, his eyelids drooping slightly, hiding the ferocity in his eyes. He raised his eyes again and looked at Assistant Wei. His attitude was impeccable. "It's okay, I will give Master Xiao an injection of glucose to stabilize his vital signs and then do further examinations." As soon as he finished speaking, he was about to push Assistant Wei away, but the next second, Assistant Wei's eyes suddenly turned cold. With a snap of his fingers, he began to show murderous intent. "Someone, arrest Dr. Chen." The first time they didn't even mention whether to eat fruit or not. There must be something wrong with this person. Sure enough, Dr. Chen sensed the danger. Under the protection of Wei Tezu and the old hen, not only could he not hurt Xiao Yi, but if he delayed any further, he might even lose his life. He glared at Assistant Wei viciously, then quickly tore off the heavy protective suit, flashed towards the window at an extremely fast speed, and then jumped down from the 22-story building. Special Assistant Wei was afraid that there might be Dr. Chen's accomplices among the remaining doctors, so he gave his subordinates a look and they quickly ran to the window to check the situation. Assistant Wei's eyes were fixed on the remaining doctors in the ward. The sudden change also shocked the remaining doctors. In order to prove their innocence, they hurriedly took off their hats and masks to identify themselves. At this time, his men also came back from the window and shook their heads helplessly at Assistant Wei, indicating that they could not be tracked. On the contrary, Xiao Yi's condition on the bed suddenly worsened at this time. His teeth suddenly clenched, his body twitched, and his fists involuntarily smashed against the bedboard. The doctors nervously dressed themselves and were about to go forward again, but Assistant Wei no longer dared to trust anyone present. Thinking of the girl just now, he made up his mind, pushed away all the doctors, walked out of the room, and walked respectfully in front of Su Ruo. "I'm sorry, I was blind and offended the distinguished lady. At this moment, I only ask you to save Mr. Xiao's life. You can set any conditions you want." When his subordinates saw that Special Assistant Wei had done such a shocking thing, they all hesitated to speak and wanted to persuade him to think twice. But Assistant Wei only gave them a threatening look, and they had no choice but to shut up. Su Ruo curled up a cold smile on her lips, and it was obvious that she was quite satisfied with Assistant Wei's attitude at this moment. Liang glanced at the men beside Assistant Wei and walked towards the ward. But only she and Assistant Wei knew best that it was not Assistant Wei who trusted her at this time. Rather, she is the last straw that Assistant Wei can grasp. If you believe her, you can refute it. If you don't believe her, Xiao Yi's fate can be summed up in one word: death. Because Xiao Yi's condition has deteriorated to the point where even the most powerful doctors in the current medical system are powerless. Besides, he is just barely surviving, that's all. Chapter 6. It can be saved, but it will take a few days. Su Ruo sat down beside Xiao Yi's bed, with no silver needles, no medicine, and no medical-related items in her hands. Only after she ordered people to hold down Xiao Yi's body, she placed her fingers on Xiao Yi's pulse and concentrated on sensing it. Looking at her calm and composed look, it would be better to say that she was joking than to say that she came here to treat Xiao Yi. But because of the support of Special Assistant Wei, no one, whether the doctors in the hospital or Xiao Yi's other subordinates, dared to question it. After a moment, Su Ruo retracted her finger and looked at Assistant Wei, who looked apprehensive and obviously still had doubts about her, and said, "It can be saved, but it will take a few days." Hearing Su Ruo's words, everyone including Assistant Wei, including the medical team who were blocked at the wall, looked at Su Ruo with a ghostly look. Assistant Wei asked what everyone was thinking. "You mean, in a few days, will Master Xiao be able to recover?" Su Ruo raised her eyebrows with a smile. "Are you doubting my ability?" Assistant Wei shook his head repeatedly. "I dare not, but all the doctors before were powerless, so." As Su Ruo's smile became more and more sarcastic, Assistant Wei's voice became lower and lower. The reason why he doubted Su Ruo's words was because Xiao Yi's condition had worsened. Although there was the mischief of Dr. Chen before, since he was injured this time, the most advanced medical equipment has detected that Xiao Yi had hidden injuries, and I'm afraid that even if the external injuries are cured, he won't be able to last long. But Su Ruo said that she could recover. How could people not be surprised? Su Ruo took the pen and paper from the bedside, wrote down a list of items including the silver needle, and handed it to Assistant Wei. "If you want him to live, prepare everything within half an hour. Also, don't look at me like a quack. As the strongest heir to an ancient martial arts family, he is not only strong in ancient martial arts, but also in other areas on which he relies for survival. For example, medicine." So, she has the confidence to say this. The powerful aura emanated from him, forcing Assistant Wei not to question and to obey orders obediently. Su Ruo didn't say any more nonsense. He took off Xiao Yi's clothes directly, then used his fingers to push the needle and pressed Xiao Yi's important acupuncture points with his true qi, thus stabilizing his vitality. An hour and a half later, Su Ruo removed all the silver needles from Xiao Yi's body. Xiao Yi's eyelashes had begun to tremble rapidly, and in a daze, he slowly opened his eyes. Because he was too sleepy, he soon fell into sleep again. Just this one action was enough to make everyone, including Assistant Wei, excited. At this moment, pairs of grateful and shocked eyes looked at Su Ruo at the same time. Even the members of the medical team no longer had any contempt or doubt in their eyes. If their timing was not right, they would have wanted to capture Su Ruo and have a good conversation with her to learn all her medical skills. It was not the first time that Xiao Yi fell into a coma, but it was the first time that someone woke him up from a coma. Su Ruo was as calm and composed as ever, looking at Wei Tezu with a smile, an evil look spilling out from the corners of her eyes. "Don't be too happy too soon. If the traitor is not eliminated, I'm afraid you will still be facing a corpse when you wake up tomorrow morning." The happy expression on Assistant Wei's face froze in an instant, and his vigilant eyes swept across the faces of everyone in the room. The first to be intimidated were the medical team members. Although they wanted to find an opportunity to confront Su Ruo, they were afraid of being treated as traitors and eliminated, so they said a few subtle words and quickly left. Although the other men did not dare to leave their ward, they clearly kept their distance, and the looks they showed towards Su Ruo showed a bit more fear. But when they looked at the evil on Su Ruo's face, they felt that this woman might have done it on purpose. Because they were disrespectful to her at first, she deliberately tried to stir up trouble between them. If Su Ruo knew what they were thinking, she would naturally admit it openly. Now he just slightly moved his body, which was stiffened by the acupuncture treatment, and said drowsily, "Arrange a place for me to live, with a good environment and high privacy." The original owner was so pitiful. She had been imprisoned by Ji Yu Yang for 3 years and had been cut off from the outside world. Now that she had tried to save her from this suffering, she couldn't find a place to stay. When Assistant Wei received Su Ruo's order, he was not displeased at all, but was filled with joy. He was just worrying about how to leave Su Ruo's contact information openly so that they could contact each other after tonight. Now Su Ruo's proposal was exactly what he wanted. His eyes flickered slightly, and he said cheerfully, "Master Xiao has a 7-star hotel in South City. I will ask them to prepare the supreme suite for you now." Seeing Su Ruo nodded slightly, her eyes did not move. It was obvious that she had no objection to his proposal. He boldly continued to suggest, "It's so late now, it's not safe for you to go to the hotel alone. I will send a full-time driver and a group of bodyguards and servants. On the one hand, they can be used at your disposal at any time, and on the other hand, they can also protect your safety. Do you think it's feasible?" Su Ruo nodded indifferently. "It's up to you." It's not that she didn't know what Assistant Wei meant, but if she really wanted to get rid of someone, even if that person was close to her, he would not be able to keep her. Assistant Wei was delighted and quickly gave orders to arrange the most elite bodyguards, as well as the most professional servants and drivers to follow Su Ruo at all times. He secretly ordered his men, "The identity of Dr. Chen, the traitor, must be thoroughly investigated." Then, he followed Su Ruo respectfully and personally escorted her out of the hospital. While Su Ruo was treating Xiao Yi, Ji Yu Yang's men had already tracked the driving route to the hospital. Ji Yu Yang's most capable subordinate, Arjuan, who was guarding outside the hospital, informed Ji Yu Yang of the situation here. He also received Ji Yu Yang's direct order, "Seal off the hospital." Before Su Ruo is captured, no one is allowed to enter the hospital, including the emergency room. Ji Yu Yang has the confidence and strength to manage the industries under the Ji Yu group. Even those who wanted to enter and leave the hospital at this time had already complained. Even a selfish order from him could directly lead to the delay of treatment for a night emergency patient and the death of his life. But as long as he could catch Su Ruo, as long as he could let him vent his anger, why would he care how terrible the outside world was? Arjuan faithfully carried out every order of Ji Yu Yang. Therefore, when Su Ruo walked out of the elevator, what she saw was a speeding ambulance rushing towards another hospital. And the patient's family members who were waiting outside the hospital were sad and angry when they saw their relatives who were in emergency treatment being forced to transfer to another hospital. There were even quite a few people who knelt at Arjuan's feet and begged with tears streaming down their cheeks. "Please let my father get into the hospital, please. He can't stand the bumpy ride to the hospital. Please, please. I can give you my ID card. Please let my boyfriend get treatment, okay? He was in a car accident. If he doesn't get emergency treatment, he might not survive. Please open the door of the hospital, please. My son can't hold on any longer and needs emergency treatment. Please, I kowtow to you." Chapter 7, Teaching the Lackeys a Lesson, Extremely Cruel. Kneeling in front of Arjuan and others were white-haired old fathers and young people who should have been full of vigor and vitality. They carefully hid all the resentment and anger in their eyes, and there was only strong desire and even a hint of barely perceptible despair on their faces. Unless pushed to the extreme, who would be willing to give up their dignity? But for the lives of the people they care about most, they would rather give up their dignity and ask for only uncertain mercy. But in response to them, Arjuan raised his leg and kicked away a middle-aged woman who was trying to pull his trouser leg. He ordered the bodyguards who were not far away, drag them away. He had only one goal, to find Su Ruo and not let her run away again. For this goal, what does the life and death of others have to do with him? How dare you? How dare you? Let me go, let me go. I curse you, I curse you. I will destroy your life, you will not die a good death, you will not die a good death. A group of desperate people were dragged and thrown away like rag sacks, roaring and cursing in despair. But their curses sounded like the buzz of mosquitoes to Arjuan's ears. Arjuan and his friends' behavior had already aroused public anger, but they had been holding back for a slim hope. Now that they saw there was no room for maneuver, quite a number of people tried to take out their mobile phones to take pictures. However, as soon as they took out their mobile phones, they were smashed to the ground. If anyone dared to cause trouble, the bodyguards would rush out and control them. The desperate expressions of these people hurt Su Ruo's eyes. The angrier she got, the weirder the smile on her face became. I knew that the male lead Ji Yang was not a human being, but I didn't expect this man to be so cold-blooded. Assistant Wei saw at first glance that Su Ruo was the kind of person with a bad temper. Although he seemed to have a bright smile, there was actually no warmth in his eyes. He was afraid that the conflict and chaos outside the hospital would make Su Ruo feel unhappy. He was about to tell Su Ruo to leave through another exit, but he saw that Su Ruo had quickened her pace and was walking towards the center of the chaos. He looks like he's about to stand up for justice. You are miracle doctor. Assistant Wei hurriedly followed. If such a fragile girl were to get involved in this conflict, one can imagine the consequences. But Su Ruo had already turned around and glanced at him coldly. Photograph it for me. Although Assistant Wei knew that this cold look was not directed at him, he still felt a chill down his spine for no reason. He had only seen such a cold look when Mr. Xiao was angry. In fact, he was so intimidated that he dared not follow Su Ruo anymore. He took out his mobile phone and turned on the recording mode. When he followed Su Ruo with his camera, he felt like he was going crazy. If he didn't hurry up and help Su Ruo resolve the danger, he would still be taking pictures here. He smiled bitterly and shook his head, then arranged for his bodyguards to come forward and protect Su Ruo. But what happened next made his hands tremble violently, and the phone in his hand almost fell to the ground. Arjuan heard Su Ruo's voice and turned around to look. When he saw that Su Ruo, whom they were looking for, not only appeared, but also walked straight towards him. His eyes lit up slightly, and he waved his hand, signaling everyone to stop, and walked quickly to Su Ruo. He seemed respectful, but in fact he was cold and tough. Young madam, please go back. I hope you won't make things difficult for us. As soon as he finished speaking, Su Ruo was surrounded by the bodyguards he brought with him. The scene that truly shocked Assistant Wei happened at this time. Su Ruo had a faint smile on her lips and then raised her hand high. When no one reacted. Even he hadn't had time to see clearly the arc of Su Ruo's attack. Su Ruo raised her hand high and slapped Arjuan hard in the face. With a crisp sound. It was Su Ruo with a smile on her lips, and a voice that chilled her to the bone. You know what? I've been wanting to beat you up for a long time. This first slap is for you, a good person, to be treated like a dog with no conscience and who has committed many evil deeds. Arjuan was slapped by Su Ruo unexpectedly and his body bent to the side involuntarily. His face was visibly red and swollen, and blood was flowing from his nose. Arjuan stood up in disbelief, looked at Su Ruo with angry eyes, and opened his mouth, wanting to say something. Another extremely crisp snapping sound was heard. The slap fell hard again. The only difference is that last time it was the left cheek, this time it was the right cheek. After this slap, not only did Arjuan's nose bleed profusely, a flash of blood appeared, but one of his teeth was also knocked out of his mouth. Su Ruo's cold voice sounded again. The second slap is for your arrogance. Since you know I'm the young mistress, you still dare to be so disrespectful to me, you deserve to be beaten. 2 consecutive slaps and 2 cold words not only stunned Arjuan, but also made him dumbfounded. Even the bodyguards surrounding Su Ruo and Assistant Wei who was filming with his cell phone were shocked. She was obviously a thin young woman, but why did she have such a strong aura at this moment, so strong that everyone was intimidated by her and dared not step forward or act rashly? The only people who were not shocked at this moment were probably the patients' families outside the hospital. They only felt grateful and relieved. When Arjuan and others rushed towards Su Ruo, the blocked hospital gate naturally opened, and all the patients or injured people blocking the hospital entrance were quickly sent to the emergency room by doctors and nurses. Although they didn't dare to stop and watch the fun, everyone who passed by Su Ruo would look at her with an expression of gratitude and worry. The gratitude in their eyes did not make Su Ruo happy, but instead hurt her again. Their troubles were caused by her, but now they were grateful to her. This makes people feel inexplicably unhappy. If she is unhappy, then the person who makes her unhappy must be even more unhappy. So, when Arjun stood up with a fierce expression, glared at Su Ruo and was about to yell. Snap! 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 3 consecutive slaps were given to Arjun's face. I gave these 3 slaps on your behalf, your equally conscienceless master. He doesn't know how to teach his own dog a lesson. Since you provoked me today, I will teach you a lesson. Be a good boy next time. Remember, take a detail whenever you see me. Otherwise, I will beat you every time I see you. And keep your dog under control in the future. If it provokes me again, I will just kill him. With the last words, his cold eyes shot directly towards Assistant Wei's camera. Although Special Assistant Wei knew that Su Ruo was not staring at him, he still trembled all over when he was stared at by her. It's so fucking fierce. Looking at Su Ruo again, she had already retracted her gaze. She grabbed Arjun, who was stunned by the beating, by the collar and slapped him hard in the face again. After this slap, Arjun's body was knocked to the ground by her. He fell to the ground, looking at Su Ruo fiercely with humiliation and roared. Are you all fucking stupid? Why don't you arrest this crazy woman? Do you want to die? He looked fiercely at the group of bodyguards he brought with him, and he almost died of despair after seeing them. Chapter 8 How dare Su Ruo? But she dared. Because at some point, the bodyguards he brought with him had already been controlled by another group of men in black. The most terrifying thing was that these men in black were all looking in Su Ruo's direction, as if they were waiting for her instructions. Before Arjun could understand what this meant. Then he saw Su Ruo's face with a devilish smile appeared in his sight again, looking at him coldly. Oh yeah, I missed 2 slaps. After she finished speaking, she raised her leg and slapped Arjun twice with the soles of her shoes. After these 2 moves, everyone who witnessed it couldn't help but feel their teeth aching. It was so painful just looking at it. But Su Ruo remained calm and said, I'll beat you up with these 2 blows. You're just barking and biting for no reason and disturbing my rest and sleep. By the way, please tell your master a message for me. Since his hospital is not aimed at curing illnesses and saving lives, there is no need for him to be the major shareholder behind the hospital. After she finished speaking, she raised her leg and kicked forward hard. Under her kick, Arjun's body drew an arc in the air and fell on the road outside the hospital with a bang. She looked at Arjun's men who were under control. Before she could give any orders, a group of bodyguards who were paid by Jiu Yankai and carefully trained, tremblingly begged for mercy from Su Ruo. Young madam, don't blame us, we were just following orders. I'm afraid that even if they were not facing Su Ruo with their hands twisted and half kneeling on the ground, they would be scared to their knees by Su Ruo just by seeing what happened to Arjun. In the face of their pleas for mercy, Su Ruo did not pay any extra attention. It was also at this moment that they fell into a disadvantage. Just 10 minutes ago, facing a group of patients' family members crying and begging for mercy, would they have shown any mercy? Or if it wasn't her today, but the weak Su Ruo in the original book, would they show any mercy? Won't. So, when Su Ruo looked at Special Assistant Wei and saw that his camera was aimed at a group of bodyguards who were begging for mercy in fear, she confirmed that he had captured the cowardice and weakness of these bodyguards in absolutely high definition. She nodded with satisfaction, looked at the bodyguards, and said coldly, "Throw it out." After saying this, the bodyguards arranged by Assistant Wei did not stop, twisted and dislocated their arms and legs, and then threw them out one after another. The reason why I dislocated my joint was that I was afraid these bastards would do something bad again. Assistant Wei also pressed the stop button at this time and hurriedly handed over the phone respectfully with both hands. Now, when he faced Su Ruo again, it was like looking at a god. Not only is his medical skill amazing, but his skills are also extraordinary. The most important thing is that his demeanor is so strong. In addition to admiration, they were also deeply grateful that they had not been overly rude to Su Ruo before, otherwise they would have been in trouble. Furthermore, at the beginning he had some doubts as to whether Su Ruo's original intention was not to save his own master Xiao. The reason I choose to believe is that I have no other choice. Now, he can basically believe that Su Ruo really wants to save Mr. Xiao. Because, such a kind and beautiful girl, such a girl who hates evil so much, would not bother to play dirty tricks. Even if she wanted to kill them, she would do it openly. Special Assistant Wei is now extremely happy, and it shows on his face without even noticing. Su Ruo looked at Assistant Wei, whose smile was so sharp that his teeth were showing, and the obvious aura of closeness that came over him. I knew exactly what was going on in his mind. She sneered and said, "Take the phone and send a copy of the video you just shot to Jiyu Yang, the eldest son of the Nancheng Jiyu group. Just make sure he has received it." After she finished speaking, she felt a strong sense of fatigue. She narrowed her eyes and ordered, "By the way, I don't have a cell phone, so prepare one for me tomorrow morning." After saying that, regardless of the surprised look in Assistant Wei's eyes when he heard that she didn't even have a cell phone, she saw her men driving the car over, so she opened the door, got in and left. Su Ruo felt so sleepy that she almost fell asleep with her eyes half closed as soon as the car started. But a terrifying roar outside the window drove away her sleepiness again. "Su Ruo! Su Ruo! How dare you! How dare you!" Su Ruoke was very familiar with this violent, ferocious and gnashing roar. After signaling the driver to stop the car, he looked out of the window and saw that Jiyu Yang had indeed appeared outside the hospital, looking at Arjuan, who was left on the side of the road, and a group of bodyguards. "I heard from them that the current miserable situation was entirely caused by Su Ruo. He was so angry that he lost his demeanor as the eldest son of the Jiyu family. He stood on the side of the road, glaring at his bodyguards and roaring like mad dogs." Su Ruo was just about to roll down the window to say friendly hello to her soon-to-be ex-husband. But then I heard an even more arrogant and cold voice, "How dare she?" "So what if she dared? Not only did she dare to beat up your dogs, she also asked me to take pictures so you can see with your own eyes how your dogs cried and begged for mercy under her slap." Assistant Wei had a nonchalant yet extremely wicked smile on his face that he had just learned from Su Ruo. In front of the furious Jiyu Yang, he sent the video he had just shot to Jiyu Yang's mobile phone. Then he said, "Please enjoy it," and left in a carefree manner. But suddenly he seemed to think of something and turned back to look at Jiyu Yang. "And Miss Su Ruo has already said that since you are the largest shareholder behind this hospital, but you don't take it as your responsibility to cure diseases and save lives, then there is no need for you to own this hospital." After Assistant Wei finished speaking, he strode into the hospital. He knew that this lady's name was Su Ruo. He was going to quickly investigate all of Su Ruo's information so that he could brag about her to Master Xiao and his men. He tilde. Jiyu Yang didn't care what Assistant Wei said. He heard the notification tone on his phone and subconsciously clicked on the unread message. As soon as he opened it, he saw Su Ruo with an evil smile on his face. He raised his hand and slapped Arjuan so hard that his body bent over involuntarily. Jiyu Yang was so angry that his hands and body were shaking. He was so angry that he didn't know how to react for a moment. But at this moment, a nervous voice sounded. "Mr. Jiyu, we brought Miss Wanwan here. She was in a serious car accident just now. One of her arms was scratched and her ankle was sprained. Fortunately, a rough examination showed no other external or internal injuries. But she was very frightened and kept calling your name." Jiyu Yang's mind was distracted by Wanwan and he couldn't ask about Su Ruo for the time being. He put away his phone and quickly rushed towards the ambulance not far away, with a nervous look on his face. "Wanwan, Wanwan." Su Ruo lay back on the chair and said calmly, "Let's drive." The driver could hear a hint of regret and sigh in these three simple words. Isn't he, Su Ruo, regretful? After such a severe collision, Wanwan only suffered minor injuries. If I come to the hospital later, I guess I will recover on my own. Is this the life blessed by the heroine's halo? Compare it with Su Ruo's tragic end tonight. In the original book, not only was she seriously injured, but the saddest thing was that the original owner was not discovered until the next morning by a kind-hearted person who then called an ambulance for her. As a result, the original owner suffered further injuries and had to lie in bed for several months before he recovered. Alas, people are indeed different. But now that Su Ruo is here, no matter how strong their aura is, they will never have an easy time. Chapter 9. She was enough to amaze time when we first met. When Su Ruo was escorted back to the 7-star hotel by his men, he fell asleep on the bed as soon as he entered the room. Or maybe the original owner was too weak. She was so sleepy that she didn't even pay attention to the pleasant sound of coins jingling in her mind. Just to make sure there was no danger, she continued to sleep soundly. When she woke up the next morning, she felt refreshed and had completely forgotten what had happened in her mind last night. Knowing that Xiao Yi's men would be guarding her outside and that the cell phone she needed would definitely be ready, she opened the door decisively. Sure enough, not only the mobile phone she wanted, but also the clothes, breakfast, and accessories that she had not arranged were all prepared neatly by her followers. After selecting the clothes she liked, she took the phone and returned to the room. After she entered the book, she encountered various things, so she has not yet seen her own face and figure. But when I thought about it, although Ji Yang married the original owner, he never touched the original owner for 3 whole years, and didn't even hold her hand. On the contrary, in addition to Ji Yang, he also kept a number of stand-ins, and those stand-ins were basically used in bed. Su Ruo once doubted whether the original owner, although she looked like Wan in figure or appearance, had some unspeakable hidden illness. Otherwise, why would she? But when she walked to the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the bathroom, when she looked in the mirror, she saw a young woman who looked and had the exact same figure as she did before she transmigrated into the book. Looking at the hot body wrapped under the black skirt, looking at the familiar beautiful face in the mirror, with fair skin, bright red lips, and slightly raised eyes. When she smiles, an endless amount of weirdness flows out of her. Even when she doesn't smile, she is as pure as an elf that has strayed into the human world. But Ji Yang had kept such a beautiful woman at home for 3 years without touching her. He was even so angry that he beat her up. It's confirmed, Ji Yang is not only sick but also blind. However, Su Ruo was very satisfied. If the body she possessed was touched by a scum, she would probably be so disgusted that she would chop off the thing on Ji Yang's body. Her fingers gently unbuttoned her clothes, which fell to the ground, and a swirling mist rose up. This moment and this place was as beautiful as a fairyland. I don't know if it was Su Ruo's muttering that produced the effect of quantum entanglement. On the top floor of the hospital, Ji Yang, who had accompanied Wanwan all night, finally couldn't help yawning when he looked at Wanwan's sleeping face at dawn. After a yawn, Wanwan's face in the hazy vision involuntarily turned into Su Ruo's face. But what surprised him was that when he tried to carefully see what Su Ruo looked like and how similar she was to Wan, his eyes became blurry and he couldn't remember what Su Ruo really looked like at all. And the real appearance of Su Ruo in his mind was the same as when he first saw her 3 years ago. It was so clear that it was enough to amaze time. The first time he saw Su Ruo, she was sitting in a milk tea shop. She scooped up a piece of cake with a spoon and fed it to the lips of the boy sitting opposite her. She would never forget her expression at that moment. She was smiling, her eyes were narrowed, and countless tiny specks of light were emitted from between her eyes. Looking at the clothes she and the boy opposite her were wearing, they were the school uniforms of Imperial Capital University. A young girl in her prime, if her family conditions are a little better, would dress up beautifully, but she was wearing a school uniform, which could only mean that her family conditions were very ordinary. Including the family conditions of the boy sitting opposite her, they are probably not that good either. Yet, such a poor couple has such a sweet and happy emotional atmosphere. He had played with countless celebrity models, but he had never played with a pure cyan type like Su Ruo. In particular, her face looked so similar to Wanwan, who suddenly disappeared. In an instant, he had the desire to possess her, to keep her by his side, and to allow her to smile like this only to him. Later, he did trap her by his side in the name of marriage and gave her family 10 million, and they obediently handed her over to him. However, in the past 3 years, he has never smiled at her as he did when they first met, a smile with stars in his eyes. When facing him, she could only lower her head and obey him submissively. Even when he forced her to raise her head, she still had a stern face, as if she had lost her parents, which was disgusting to look at. So he made things difficult for her in various ways just to tear off her mask. He would rather see her cry hard, than to see her cold face. But later he found that she couldn't even cry. Even when he bullied her badly, she would just shed tears silently. Even when her teeth were bleeding, she still wouldn't cry out loud and would just shed tears silently. He was so stubborn that he hated her. If she hadn't secretly gone to check with her ex-boyfriend to confirm whether she was a virgin, she would have heard her ex-boyfriend talking about how wild and submissive she was in bed, and how much she drove him crazy. I'm afraid he would have tortured her to death in bed a long time ago. What a pity. He never touches a woman who has been touched by others. He just thinks they are dirty and it makes him feel disgusted. Until Wanwan came back, she still hadn't completely torn off Su Ruo's mask. He was tired, so he simply gave her 1 million and sent her away. There is no point in him keeping such a cold, uninteresting woman who has been touched by others. However, she unexpectedly caused him trouble during their divorce. Still 2 waves of unexpected things. Thinking of the wildness with which Su Ruo threw the divorce agreement in his face last night. Then I thought of Su Ruo standing at the door under the light, looking back at me seductively like a fairy. In the video, Su Ruo swung her arm and slapped Arjuan in the face again and again. The crisp and powerful sound of the slap, the resounding words, the aura was fully revealed, and it was completely different from the past. It simply ignited his blood. Whenever he thought of it, he suddenly found that he was neither angry nor annoyed. There was only fanaticism in his heart, extreme fanaticism. So wild, so fierce, so hot, so unbridled, just like a hot rose covered with thorns, making people want to pick it and ravage it. She endured it by his side for 3 years, and only exploded when he asked for a divorce. She must have been unwilling to divorce him, so she got irritated and turned against him. At this moment, he no longer cared whether Su Ruo had been touched by other men. Now that he has caught her, whether the marriage ends or not is no longer important. Conquer her first, and see her trembling, crying and begging for mercy under him. From then on, let him be her master, and cry and laugh for him. That's what he really wants to see. If she is well behaved, it is not impossible not to get a divorce. Thinking of that scene, a sick and twisted smile appeared on his face. Even at this moment, he had completely ignored the fact that the person he was facing was his beloved girl Wanwan, who was lying on the bed and whom he was obsessed with. His purpose here was to comfort Wanwan, who had been frightened last night. Even unconsciously, he stretched out his hand and pinched Wanwan's face, and his voice was low and distorted. Su Ruo, you can't run away this time. I won't let you run away again. Chapter 10. How could such a beautiful girl be Su Ruo? Wanwan, who was not asleep, felt Ji Yu Yang's hands approaching and thought she would be comforted by Ji Yu Yang. Unexpectedly, I felt a sharp pain on my face, and then I heard Ji Yu Yang's suppressed, lustful call. Her expression of pretending to sleep remained unchanged, but her nails had already dug deeply into her palms. Just at this moment, his cell phone suddenly rang, bringing him back to his senses. Mr. Ji Yu, we still haven't found any trace of the young mistress. After she left the hospital last night, she seemed to have disappeared from the face of the earth. Seeing such a response, Ji Yu Yang's eyes became colder, but the possessiveness in his eyes also became stronger. He gave the order, keep looking. Then he emptied his mind and looked out the window downstairs. Although he was on the top floor at this time, with his super eyesight, he still saw a young woman getting out of a black car outside the hospital. The young woman had waist-length hair, loosely tied up with a headband with a pearl. A light pink tight-fitting top, the hem of which was tucked into a white pleated skirt, creating a waist so thin that it would break if bent. Her steps in her slender high heels are brisk and joyful, her white skirt and long hair flutter in the wind. She is so beautiful that she seems not to be a human being. No matter how many men and women passed by her, they couldn't help but look at her a few more times. Some bold men and women even handed her their mobile phones, obviously wanting to exchange social accounts with her. What really caught Ji Yu Yang's attention was not only this extremely aggressive beauty. Instead, he actually suspected that this person was Su Ruo. He rubbed his eyes, looked carefully several times, then walked out of the ward and asked his men to observe him for a while. It was not until the beautiful woman disappeared into the hospital building that they finally came to their conclusion. Mr. Ji Yu, how could it be the young mistress? How can the young mistress be as beautiful as this young lady? Ji Yu Yang finally breathed a sigh of relief when he heard that his subordinates said exactly the same things he thought. He said, how could this person be Su Ruo? Even when he first saw Su Ruo was not so beautiful. What's more, it's now. After thinking it through, he decisively returned to Wanwan's ward. But at this moment, looking at Wanwan's haggard face on the bed, the haggard face that always made him feel distressed in the past, he not only forgot the distress, but what he thought of in his heart was the beautiful girl who exuded the breath of youth just now. He even wondered in his heart whether he should arrange his men to search the place and bring the girl to his club. What Ji Yu Yang didn't know was that even his subordinates who were standing at the window with him to confirm it didn't know at all. Who else could this youthful girl be but Su Ruo? Xiao Yi's current situation was only temporarily stabilized by her. In order for him to recover, she would need to give him acupuncture treatment regularly over the next few days. So after breakfast, she came to the hospital. If Ji Yu Yang walked out of the ward at this moment, he would see Su Ruo's beautiful figure walking out of the elevator and appearing in front of him in just 5 minutes. But he had to accompany Wanwan, so 5 minutes later, Su Ruo walked into the room at the end of the corridor unhindered. When Xiao Yi's men lurking around saw her coming, they thought of what Wei's special assistant had told them last night after he came back. From now on, if you respect me as much as you respect Miss Su Ruo, otherwise if you offend her, I'm afraid even Master Xiao won't be able to protect you. So now the people lurking around came out one after another, without the vigilance and hostility they had towards her last night. Instead, they all bowed respectfully towards her. But when they were about to speak, Su Ruo reached out to stop them. Because Su Ruo had already heard Assistant Wei's voice coming from the closed ward. Assistant Wei said, Master Xiao, you can wake up this time, it's really thanks to a little fairy. She is not only beautiful, strong, kind, but also has superb medical skills and martial arts, and her aura is also super strong. Then, he recounted to Xiao Yi in a voice as rhythmic and vivid as that of a broadcaster how Su Ruo had treated Xiao Yi last night and how she had beaten Arjuan after leaving the hospital. At the end, his excited voice suddenly turned cold. Alas, but Master Xiao, Fairy Su Ruo is so awesome, but her life is not very good. Not only did she grow up in a family that favored boys over girls, but she was also bullied by her parents and younger brother at home. 3 years ago, she was admitted to the Imperial Capital University. There was a boy from a wealthy family, good-looking, and who truly liked her, who pursued her and loved her. She should have a bright future and a happy relationship. But she happened to be taken a fancy to by that bastard Ji Yang, who not only forced her to break up, but also forced her to drop out of school. In the end, he gave her parents 10 million and sold her to that bastard Ji Yang as his wife. It would have been fine if Ji Yang had married her and had an easy life, but do you know how miserable her life was after marriage? It was so miserable that she didn't even have a cell phone. I bought her all her cell phones last night. Sigh. Master Xiao, I say, why don't we give the little fairy a hand, help her escape from the sea of suffering, and teach that bastard Ji Yuyan a lesson at the same time, what do you think? Listening to Assistant Wei's moving and infectious words, even the well-trained bodyguards looked at Su Ruo with eyes full of pity, and they couldn't help but shed tears, wanting to show some care for Su Ruo. Su Ruo also raised her eyebrows. What a talented person. But what puzzled her even more was that Xiao Yi actually woke up. According to her speculation, Xiao Yi would need to be treated by her at least once before he would wake up. This only proves one thing, that is, Xiao Yi's physical foundation is really good. If it hadn't been caused by a villain, how could I have suffered like this? Thinking of this, her eyes couldn't help but turn cold. But she was not in a hurry to push the door and enter. Even the bodyguards around her who wanted to go in to report to Assistant Wei were stopped by her. Because she wanted to hear what kind of reaction and feedback Xiao Yi would give when Assistant Wei told him about her. But I had to disappoint her. After Wei Tesu finished his emotional and vivid speech, she only heard a very light and faint hum. And then, nothing happened. Even Assistant Wei didn't expect his boss to be so calm, so he asked again tentatively. Master Xiao, don't you have anything to say? Xiao Yi just glanced at him very lightly, but this glance was full of inquiry. As if asking, what else do you want me to say? Assistant Wei almost became autistic. I know that you, Mr. Xiao, are aloof, but are you really so aloof when facing your savior? Aren't you afraid that your savior will run away? While Assistant Wei was complaining in his heart, Su Ruo finally took a deep breath and pushed the door open. My favorite beauty didn't even react at all when she heard about my deeds for the first time. Especially since I saved his life. It would be a lie to say I'm not depressed. Who would dare to treat her like this in the past? Oh, will there be a future? But after all, inside the ward was his favorite character from the book, and now he was more than just a character, but a living, breathing person in front of him. Especially when she pushed open the door of the ward and saw him half lying on the bed, his face looked pale and haggard due to long-term illness. A man who is still handsome enough to take your breath away. So when faced with a man's first time showing no extra reaction to her, what else can she do? Just go along with him. Just pamper him. Who made him so handsome and good-looking? Chapter 11. Are you flirting with Mr. Xiao? Are you flirting? The moment the door was pushed open. Whether it was Xiao Yi or Assistant Wei, everyone in the ward felt their eyes light up. It's like sunlight shining in. But when I looked towards the door, I realized that what was bright was not the sunlight, but a beautiful girl coming in carrying a food box. Seeing the girl appear, Xiao Yi frowned involuntarily, his eyes full of inquiry. Assistant Wei was also stunned for a moment, and called out tentatively, Miss Su. Su Ruo closed the door with her backhand, walked into their house in her slender white high heels, put the lunchbox on the table, and then raised her eyebrows and looked at Assistant Wei. What? You don't recognize me after not seeing me for one night? I heard a familiar voice, saw familiar features, especially the signature naughty smile on Su Ruo's lips. Assistant Wei suddenly covered his face and said, "Did you go to absorb the essence of living people last night? How come you have become so beautiful after not seeing you for one night?" The little fairy she called was right. Today's breathtaking beauty, what else could it be but a fairy? Su Ruo chuckled. She didn't expect that Assistant Wei, who was just a fluttery paper man in the book, would turn out to be such a lively and interesting person in real life. Looking at Xiao Yi, whose brows were still slightly furrowed, as if he was not used to her appearance and did not agree with her, the smile on his face faded and he even wanted to sneer. What the protagonist's uncle, what the most powerful boss in the book, what young, promising and capable. Even more paper thin than a paper man. However, Assistant Wei was secretly glancing at Xiao Yi's expression. The more I glanced, the happier I became. In the past, if any woman dared to appear in front of Master Xiao without any negotiation, she would have been thrown out by Master Xiao. He even refused to even look at her. I never thought that I would be able to see in my lifetime a scene where Master Xiao not only did not throw away a woman who approached him, but even followed the girl with his eyes. Su Ruo lazily sat on the armrest of the sofa next to her, looking at Xiao Yi who was staring at her, and then looking at Assistant Wei who was smiling slyly beside her, wondering what he was thinking. Her red lips curved into a cute dimple, and she asked the two with a smile, "Why, isn't it enough that I prepare and deliver the breakfast myself? You also want me to feed you myself?" While saying this, she didn't avoid his gaze, but just stared at Xiao Yi brazenly. From his sharp face, to his super-shaped neck, to his collarbone that even the hospital gown can't cover, and the sexiness of his muscular waist. At the same time, you can see her appreciation and approval from her eyes as clear as streams. And her satisfaction. Isn't it satisfying? It is indeed the character in the book that I admire the most. It is perfect, absolutely perfect. It's so perfect that I really want to lock it up at home, watch it during the day, hold it at night, and take good care of it for the rest of my life. Before she transmigrated into the book, others thought she had some serious illness, and she even refused to favor a handsome young man who was sent to her bed. But only she knew that she looked down upon those mediocre women at all, and the one she wanted to pick was the flower of the highest mountain, such as Xiao Yi. As her thoughts progressed, her eyes became less pure, and there seemed to be hooks in them. Wherever something passed by Xiao Yi, he would feel a burning sensation. Finally, he was at a disadvantage in the first eye contact. He calmly pulled the quilt up and looked at Assistant Wei who was watching their eye contact stupidly. Without saying a word, Assistant Wei understood what he meant. "Master Xiao, I'll bring you breakfast now." Assistant Wei chuckled and walked towards Su Ruo. He stretched out his long arm and was about to take the food box next to Su Ruo. He even smiled slyly at Su Ruo, with the subtext being, "Little fairy, your target is indeed our Master Xiao." But his hand hasn't touched the food box yet. Su Ruo took the lead, and with a slight hook of her slender white fingers painted with bright red nail polish, the lunchbox bag fell into her hands again. She took out a box and gave it to Assistant Wei. "This is yours." Then, she held another food box in her fair palm and looked at Xiao Yi with a half smile. He continued what he had just said, "But if you want to treat the sick and the wounded, you can let me feed them myself." Since his men had seen through it, she stopped pretending. Otherwise, if such a high-quality man was taken by someone else, where would she find the second person who would make her heart beat? Assistant Wei gave Su Ruo another sly smile and tried to leave with his lunchbox. Being able to eat the breakfast prepared by the fairy herself, he felt like he was filled with fairy spirit. So for the little fairy's great goal, he has to cooperate, right? But when he met Mr. Xiao's compelling gaze, it seemed as if he was saying, "You can go, but only if you still want to see the sunshine tomorrow morning." This made Assistant Wei a little unsure whether to leave or stay. But he didn't need to think much. Su Ruo was already sitting beside Xiao Yi's bed. The moment she opened the food box, the rich aroma of food accompanied by a faint fragrance rushed straight into Xiao Yi's nostrils. He was in a coma for a whole night and was bedridden for more than a week. If you are seriously injured or sick, you will have no appetite. But at this moment, the fragrance created by Su Ruo made his eyes involuntarily look towards the food box in front of him, and there was a slight emotional fluctuation in his eyes. Seeing that Su Ruo was really going to feed him with her own hands, as her hand moved closer to him, the fragrance that could not be suppressed by the aroma of food aroused his nostrils even more wantonly. Xiao Yi finally took action. He reached out, took the food box and spoon from Su Ruo's hands, and began to eat politely. Su Ruo sat beside the bed, neither too far nor too close to him, and watched Xiao Yi's every move attentively and seriously. When Assistant Wei saw that he finally had nothing to do, he dared to sneak aside to eat his breakfast. But he couldn't help but glance towards Xiao Yi. The more I glance at them, the more I think, how come these two people are so well matched together? Miss Su looked at Mr. Xiao, and there was warmth and light in her cold eyes. Mr. Xiao always hated anyone getting close to him, but Miss Su Ruo happened to be right next to his bed, and he didn't react at all. It's a pity that Miss Su Ruo married at a young age. I don't know if he is planning to divorce and remarry. Just as I thought of this, I heard a bang and the door of the ward was violently slammed open from the outside by gravity. Immediately afterwards, a roar of suppressed excitement was heard. Su Ruo, get the hell out of here. Who else could the person standing at the door be but Ji Yuyang? While he was thinking about the beautiful girl downstairs, he received a message from the men who were tracking Su Ruo for him. It is said that Su Ruo came to their hospital and entered the room at the end of the corridor on the top floor of the hospital. The moment he got the news, he came over. However, he did not expect that when he kicked open the door and looked inside, he saw the girl who was brimming with youthfulness and exuding alluring beauty, sitting on the bed with her back to him. Chapter 12. Could Miss Su's acting be a little more fake? That's right, although it was just a silhouette, Ji Yuyang recognized her. This was the girl who had just stirred his calm heartstrings and made him inexplicably stunned at a glance from a distance. Especially at this moment, just a back view, his heart began to beat wildly uncontrollably. Looking at the girl's slender back covered by long hair. Looking at the girl, she lowered her head slightly, as if she was concentrating on looking at the person on the bed. He really had a strong urge. Walk over, hold the beautiful girl's shoulders, let her look back at you, and let her only have eyes for you. But suddenly he thought that he had revealed such a cruel side in front of the fairy-like girl who made his heart beat faster at first sight. He actually yelled out that bitch Su Ruo's name. Ji Yuyang's fists hardened. Someone is going to be in trouble. But at this moment, he suddenly felt a chill running up his spine, and a feeling more oppressive than facing his own grandmother enveloped his entire body and mind. Without even waiting for him to understand why he was feeling this moment, he just shifted his gaze away and looked towards the place that gave him a sense of danger. I just met a pair of deep and cold eyes, more ferocious than the most ferocious beast in the jungle. He then heard 3 cold and indifferent words, throw it out. Then, it had been less than 3 seconds since Ji Yuyang pushed open the door and saw Su Ruo's back. There was no time to react. Then a group of Xiao Yi's men appeared silently, grabbed him, and threw him directly onto the hard ground outside the ward. 2 bangs were heard. The first sound was made when Ji Yuyang was thrown to the ground. The second sound was the sound of the ward door closing. A second before the ward door closed, Su Ruo looked back and saw with her own eyes how Ji Yuyang's body was thrown to the ground, and how his facial expression was hideous and distorted at that moment. Obviously, the fall was quite severe. Only the bodyguards who came with Xiao Yi saw that their young master, who had always been a powerful figure in South City, was suffering such a great humiliation at this moment. How could someone dare to be so disrespectful and humiliating to their young master? A group of bodyguards came running over without Ji Yuyang's orders. You are so big, R. Before they could finish their words, Xiao Yi's bodyguards rushed forward, grabbed Ji Yuyang's bodyguards and Ji Yuyang, and threw them towards the distant ward. As a result, a group of people fell to the ground and cried out in pain. In the chaos, Ji Yuyang's furious roar was heard weakly, do you all want to die? Hearing Ji Yuyang's voice coming from the bottom of all the people falling, his men were so scared that they quickly moved away. Then, Ji Yuyang was seen lying on the ground with his handsome face down, looking dead, breathing with difficulty. Seeing this scene, several bodyguards were so frightened that they rushed forward and helped him up. Sitting up straight, one could see even more clearly how horrific Ji Yuyang's face was. Because of the friction from the ground and the beating and squeezing from gravity, his face was now as swollen as a steamed bun. But those eyes became even more ferocious, and they swept across everyone's faces coldly. Who said Su Ruo was in that ward? Go down and receive your punishment. False report, false alarm, S-level punishment. After he finished speaking, without caring at all how terrified his men were and how they were kneeling down to beg for mercy, he stood up with a sneer and staggered towards the doctor's office. Letting him suffer such a great injustice and not taking their lives was his last act of mercy. In the ward, after Su Ruo withdrew her gaze from Ji Yuyang's miserable appearance, she looked at Xiao Yi again, and her eyes involuntarily brightened a little. Seeing the man still drinking porridge calmly at this time, his expression was even more nonchalant than hers. If she didn't want to spoil the fun, she would have wanted to ask, "Do you know that's your nephew? The kind you love?" However, Assistant Wei laughed again, looked at Xiao Yi and Su Ruo, and then looked at the door that was closed again. He knew that although Master Xiao looked cold, he treated the little fairy differently, even if it was unconsciously, but it was different, he. "I'm afraid something will really happen between the two of them, so he'll just quietly support them as a couple tilder." Xiao Yi was indeed not disturbed from beginning to end. "We have encountered situations in the past that are more severe than the current one. What was the twist just now?" But his inquiring eyes still looked towards Su Ruo's face. No one could read the truest emotions in his heart. Su Ruo met Xiao Yi's pressured eyes, but she was not afraid. Instead, she rolled her eyes and a naughty smile appeared on her lips. She said in a voice that seemed to be dripping with water, "I was really scared just now. Thank you so much, Mr. Xiao. If it weren't for you, I would have been caught by my ex-husband immediately. I'm afraid no one can heal your injuries." Oh, it was really scary. Assistant Wei was so shocked by Su Ruo's exaggerated acting skills that he almost dropped the bowl in his hand to the ground. I stared at Su Ruo, who was smiling and saying, "I'm so scared," as if I had seen a ghost. I really want to yell, "Miss Su, can your acting be a little more fake? You're trying to deceive Mr. Xiao, can you be more sincere?" Thinking about how so many women in the past wanted to get close to Mr. Xiao, their acting skills were even more realistic than those of movie queens. They might have deceived him, but Mr. Xiao never even looked at them. And Su Ruo. Assistant Wei was shocked. In the past, so many movie queen level performances had never made Xiao Yi look sideways. But at this moment, facing Su Ruo's acting that was so fake, Xiao Yi didn't even look away from her. He even said to Su Ruo, "Purpose." It turns out that Mr. Xiao not only saw through Miss Su's performance, but also condoned Miss Su's behavior. Even though Mr. Xiao was still so cold, Assistant Wei still smiled like an auntie. "Well, this is a good sign." Su Ruo didn't say anything, just watched Xiao Yi calmly drink the last mouthful of porridge. Assistant Wei decisively took the bowl of porridge away. Then Xiao Yi's gaze finally fell heavily on her face and never moved away, waiting for her next answer. Su Ruo then moved her long legs and returned to the sofa. Obviously, the physical distance has been widened. But Su Ruo's eyes were as fine and dense as silk threads, rapidly shortening the distance between the two of them. Just one look from him seemed to reveal her true thoughts. Sure enough, a vague and unreal voice sounded, "My target is you, what do you think?" The ethereal voice and the dazzlingly beautiful face, the double impact, really makes people have a strong sense of unreality. Even Assistant Wei stopped his rich psychological activities for a moment. But in this unreality, the girl's ethereal voice seems so real. The truth lingers for a long time. After Su Ruo finished speaking, she saw Xiao Yi just staring at her without answering for a long time. There was no unnecessary emotion in his eyes. It was as if he didn't hear his own words at all. Just as Su Ruo sighed silently and showed a sad expression, "How can you be so unromantic?" Xiao Yi slowly raised the corners of his lips. Chapter 13 Mr. Xiao, you deserve to be single for life. It looked like Xiao Yi was smiling. However, this faint smile is more chilling than any fierce expression. This is probably what is meant by a smile on the outside but not on the inside. Xiao Yi's next words confirmed Su Ruo's feelings. Because Xiao Yi also spoke up soon after, and his voice was like the wind blowing in the dead of winter. "Do you know what happened to the last woman who targeted me?" Su Ruo raised her eyebrows slightly. Cruel words came out of Xiao Yi's lips coldly, "The grass on the grave is taller than you." Then after he finished speaking, he didn't look at Su Ruo again. He silently turned away, his eyes slightly closed, as if he didn't want to communicate with Su Ruo anymore. But then, another indifferent sentence echoed in the ward again, "It's not my turn yet." Assistant Wei almost went crazy after hearing Mr. Xiao's merciless words towards his savior. He was afraid that Xiao Yi's attitude would be bad and Su Ruo would be angry and leave. "I really want to ask you, Mr. Xiao, do you still want to live?" But after hearing the explanation that didn't sound like an explanation, Wei couldn't help but secretly take a deep breath, and complained in his heart again, "Mr. Xiao, you have such low emotional intelligence, you deserve to be a single dog for the rest of your life." But it is true that the risk factor increases sharply when following Mr. Xiao. After hearing the first half of Xiao Yi's threat, Su Ruo's smile had cooled down a little, but it became sincere again when he said the second half of the sentence. Since it is so difficult to communicate with this piece of ice, I'm simply too lazy to communicate with it. Anyway, his life is still in his own hands, and they have a long way to go. She began to fiddle with the tools she had prepared last night, ready to treat Xiao Yi again. But when Xiao Yi, who was half lying on the bed with his eyes closed, felt his inner breath, his mind suddenly trembled violently involuntarily. In fact, he didn't believe Su Ruo at all. From being injured to being seriously injured, every step of the way was planned. It was simply because he already had hidden injuries in his body and had a very strong weakness that was being manipulated by others. So even though he had seen through the crisis he was about to face and had made all necessary preparations, he still fell into the other party's trap. But who would have thought that just when he thought he was doomed, this woman named Su Ruo actually appeared beside his bed and said that she could save his life? Oh, there is no such thing as the lucky god Jiao Fu in this world. There is only a carefully planned and premeditated plan. Since this woman wants to act in front of him, let her do it. The only thing that surprised him was, whether it was after she gave him acupuncture last night, or when he swallowed a bowl of rice porridge just now. He could feel his vitality returning. It's a real recovery. Just as he was surprised, he felt a faint fragrance approaching, and then his body felt cold. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Su Ruo walking to his bedside, pulling away the blanket on him, and then tearing off his clothes without any gentleness, and then turning his wrist. He felt a pain in his body. As Su Ruo moved, several silver needles pierced into his upper body. Su Ruo was even shameless and reached out to pull his pants. Realizing Su Ruo's next move, Xiao Yi's expression suddenly became cold and stern. A terrifying dark light surged from the bottom of his eyes and he glared at Su Ruo fiercely. He raised his hand and was about to grab Su Ruo. But at this moment, waves of pain as if thousands of blades were piercing his body spread throughout his body along the places where she had injected the needles. Pain. The pain that was 100 times more intense than any of the times he was seriously injured and on the verge of death invaded his senses. It was a miracle that he could stay awake under the pain. It was a fantasy for him to stop Su Ruo at this time. Then he saw this woman, whom he thought had ulterior motives, looking as if she could clearly see through his pain at the moment, and even gave him her signature evil smile. Then reach out and tear it apart. Click. With the sound of cloth tearing, his pants were torn directly by this woman. Just like that, his pants were torn apart with his bare hands. He finally realized that this woman was doing it on purpose. She was torturing him on purpose. Not to mention the murderous look in Xiao Yi's eyes at this moment, Assistant Wei, who witnessed the increasingly strange atmosphere between the two, was frightened like a quail at this moment, curling up his body tightly into a ball to reduce his presence. Dared to tear Mr. Xiao's pants directly, he respects Miss Su Ruo as a man. After a while, Xiao Yi finally recovered from the pain in his upper body and was able to speak a complete sentence. You're looking for death. As soon as he uttered these 3 words, Su Ruo glanced at him with a smile, which made his eyes tremble. Then Su Ruo turned her wrist. Several more silver needles pierced into Xiao Yi's legs. Then, the familiar feeling of pain surged over him, once again invading all his senses. Although he couldn't utter a word. But the murderous intent in his eyes was almost tangible. Staring at Su Ruo. If he hadn't been nearly fainting from the pain, he would have strangled the woman to death with his own hands. Facing this terrifying look, Su Ruo was not afraid at all. Not only was she not afraid, she also sat leisurely on the stool beside the bed, admiring Xiao Yi's expression and said with a smile. Master Xiao, you should understand that good medicine tastes bitter, right? Although the words he used were quite respectful, his eyes almost engraved the words, I did it on purpose, I'm trying to make things difficult for you into the air. This made Xiao Yi purse his thin lips tightly. Seeing that she couldn't tease Xiao Yi anymore, she became serious and said, the core problem of your body is not the injury you suffered a week ago, but the old injury. Old wounds are more like poison than wounds. Over the past 20 years, this poison has already penetrated deep into your bones. Even if you hadn't had this trauma a week ago, I'm afraid you wouldn't have lived for 2 years. But you are lucky, not only have you met me, a miracle doctor, but I am also a living lei feng. In the days to come, you only need to give you acupuncture once a day, bloodletting once, and drink the rice porridge prepared by me once a day. I guarantee that within a month, your body will be fully recovered, and you will be able to make great achievements in business for the rest of your life. As she spoke, she looked at Xiao Yi with a half smile. What was in his eyes was naked threat and provocation. I know that the raging pain in your body has passed by now, and you can give the order to kill or chop me up. However, I am the only one who can cure your body. Without me, you may recover today, but you won't live for even 2 years. So, causing you pain was intentional, and provoking you was intentional. I want to see if you will continue to be rude to me. Will you continue to threaten, provoke, and be cold to me? Girls should be treated gently. If someone is not gentle to her, she will not show mercy to him even if that person is her favorite character. Although Su Ruo did not say any of these thoughts, as she looked at Xiao Yi with a smile on her face, all her thoughts were revealed in these eyes that could speak. It is true that silence is better than words at this moment. Finally, after staring at each other for a long time, Xiao Yi's voice softened. Wei Dong, buy this hospital and give it to Miss Su. Special Assistant Wei finally breathed a sigh of relief. Although he knew it was wrong, he still felt that it was a good thing that his master Xiao could be controlled by Miss Su Ruo. Fortunately, there is finally someone who can control Mr. Xiao. Chapter 14. Ji Yu Yang believes that he and Su Ruo are destined to be together. Xiao Yi's attitude was only slightly softened. The following process of piercing the skin with a 3-edged needle to release the poisonous blood should have been very painful. But Xiao Yi didn't feel any pain at all. Looking at Su Ruo, who was so focused at this moment that he seemed like a different person, a dark light flashed in Xiao Yi's eyes, and the curve of his lips became increasingly cold. Oh, in her lifetime, Su Ruo is the first person who dares to threaten her like this, to provoke her like this, and to control her like this. Su Ruo is the first person who dares to openly express her interest in him and even express it in words, and yet he has not dealt with her. Many years ago, they arranged for a woman to confuse them. The woman behaved so perfectly at first, but within a week, he had her stripped naked by his men and sent to their bed. This time, this woman named Su Ruo didn't perform so perfectly. Will it be faster to catch her? 2 hours later, Su Ruo finally finished treating Xiao Yi. He raised his eyes to look at Xiao Yi, wanting to tell him some precautions or something. But when he looked up, he saw the alienation and indifference in Xiao Yi's eyes. All the precautions and concern were gone in an instant. This man deserves to be punished. He was too lazy to pay attention to Xiao Yi, so he packed up his belongings and left. There is nothing to say to this arrogant man. Seeing that Su Ruo looked unhappy, he left without even saying hello. Assistant Wei looked at Xiao Yi and was about to say something. As a result, the next second, Xiao Yi took the tablet from the bedside. After he tapped a few times with his fingers, the hospital's surveillance footage appeared on the tablet. He pointed his finger again, and Su Ruo was the only figure left in the picture. When Assistant Wei saw this wave of operations, his mouth opened into an O shape. I originally wanted to say a few words in my heart, Mr. Xiao, saying that you will never be liked by girls because of your hypocrisy. But when he saw the solemnity and inquiry on Xiao Yi's face, he understood that from the beginning to now, Mr. Xiao had never believed in Miss Su Ruo. He wanted to explain a few words and tell Xiao Yi that Su Ruo was definitely not a spy. But I also know that Mr. Xiao has always been suspicious, and no matter how much others say, it is not as good as him seeing it with his own eyes. At first, Su Ruo seemed to leave the ward angrily, but the moment she closed the door, she suddenly paused and stood at the door. I don't know what she was thinking about. The angry expression on her face instantly disappeared, revealing a bright and sincere beautiful smile. Su Ruo was angry, but she felt relieved the moment she walked out of the ward. Xiao Yi grew up in a place where he was given chronic poison, which made him suspicious and cautious, and he would not get close to anyone. And she first developed feelings for this character because of reading the book, so when she saw him, she couldn't help but get close to him. This kind of closeness feels a bit like being attentive without any reason. No wonder Xiao Yi backfired. She should be more patient. After thinking it through, Su Ruo stopped being stubborn, smiled slightly, and walked out of the hospital with brisk steps. She didn't know that her innocent smile made Xiao Yi's eyes flicker slightly. Just as she passed by a ward, Su Ruo heard a sound coming from the ward and couldn't help but stop to listen to what was going on inside. Brother Yang, what happened to you? Who hit you? How did you get yourself into this state? Although she had never heard the voice of the heroine of the original book, as soon as Su Ruo heard this name, she knew who it was without thinking. Looking through the crack in the door, I saw Ji Yu Yang and Wanwan sitting in the ward. Ji Yu Yang's face was red and swollen, as if he had been punched several times by someone. Wanwan was kneeling on the bed, applying ice to him. Wanwan looked very nervous, but Ji Yu Yang looked as if he was in a trance. In response to Wanwan's sincere questions, he would hum from time to time. Even Su Ruo could sense this perfunctory attitude, so how could Wanwan not sense it? Su Ruo frowned slightly. The plot in the book was not like that. Ji Yu Yang's eyes and heart were filled with only Wanwan. He seemed possessed by her. Whenever Wanwan frowned, he would want to kill the entire family of the person who made her frown. So what is this perfunctory attitude at this moment? Wanwan saw Ji Yu Yang once again staring into space without answering, looking as if his soul had been seduced away. She pretended to be angry and punched Ji Yu Yang's chest. Brother Yang, did you hear me talking to you? Since she had just pretended to be asleep for a while, Ji Yu Yang left for a while, and when he came back, not only was his face swollen, but his soul seemed to have been taken away. This made her confused and angry, but she didn't know what to do. It was just out of woman's intuition that she knew that Ji Yu Yang's appearance might be related to women. And could the woman who had seduced his soul be Su Ruo? The one who had taken her place in the past 3 years and became the young lady of the Ji Yu family. Thinking of this, she felt as if a thorn had pierced her heart, causing her beautiful expression to become a little stiff. Ji Yu Yang was hit on the chest and finally came back to his senses. Although he was beaten just now, this was the first time that he did not ask someone to find trouble for him first. Instead, all I could think about was that slender, beautiful figure with long hair spread over her back. When they met downstairs in the hospital, he was still hesitating whether to look for her. Then he saw her again just now, and he recognized her at the first sight. It made him feel that there must be a destiny between him and her. What are you waiting for? Just come and find it. So, at this moment, there was no Wanwan or Su Ruo in his mind, only that slender figure. He narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath, as if he could smell the faint fragrance of the beautiful girl. Wrong. Ji Yu Yang widened his eyes and looked through the crack in the door. When he saw the flowing hem of the pleated skirt and the curve of the smooth long hair passing by the door of his ward, it turned out that it was not an illusion. She really passed by, really passed by. Meeting 3 times in one day clearly told him that they were destined to be together. So, the next second, Ji Yu Yang pushed Wanwan away, and didn't even care when she couldn't help but exclaimed. Then he rushed out of the ward and chased after Su Ruo's back. I couldn't help but shout out, "Girl, wait a moment." But he was still a little late. He saw the hem of a white skirt flash outside the elevator, and the elevator door closed completely. When he rushed over, the elevator had already started to descend. He was so anxious that he punched the elevator button angrily. When Wanwan, who had been chasing after them, saw this scene, her face turned pale instantly. Inside Xiao Yi's ward, Xiao Yi curled his lips coldly and looked at Assistant Wei, who was watching the surveillance video with him, with a stern gaze, his eyes full of amusement. Special Assistant Wei saw the deep meaning in Xiao Yi's eyes. After all, he said that Su Ruo was Ji Yu Yang's wife. But at this time, their husband couldn't even recognize his wife, and his report was somewhat distorted. So he looked at Xiao Yi and asked weakly, is it possible that Ji Yu Yang didn't recognize that the beautiful girl just now was his wife? What Xiao Yi got was that he looked at the idiot and found that the idiot didn't even recognize his own wife. Isn't he an idiot? Chapter 15. I don't want to go back, you can go in first. Su Ruben didn't know that Ji Yu Yang didn't know her at all. But as she stepped away, she heard the sound of Ji Yu Yang running towards her from behind. In order to pursue her, he even ignored Wanwan. And the way Ji Yu Yang addressed her. Only then did she realize that Ji Yu Yang didn't recognize her at all. Watching the elevator number decreasing, and thinking of Ji Yu Yang's current pig-headed appearance, he began to think about chasing after girls again. The girl he wanted to chase was his wife, who had not yet obtained a divorce certificate from him. The smile on Su Ruo's lips couldn't help but become a little more enchanting. This seems interesting. When she showed this extremely evil smile, she didn't know that Xiao Yi in the ward couldn't help but have his eyes flickered again by her smile. When they walked out of the hospital, it was almost 12 o'clock. Su Ruo felt hungry and was about to have some lunch. But as soon as she walked out of the hospital, she found that she was being targeted. He walked calmly towards a secluded place, and sure enough, as soon as he reached an alley, he found it was already crowded with people. The leader was quite familiar. He was another trusted subordinate of Ji Yu Yang Alang. Because Adjuan from the first wave is still having his teeth fixed in the hospital, and after the second wave of men found Su Ruo, Jiu Yang insisted that they lied and made a false report, and gave them an S-level punishment. So Alang in the third wave became more cautious. He looks fierce, but he is actually very polite. After blocking Su Ruo's way, he not only did not draw his weapon, but instead bent down 90 degrees towards Su Ruo, and the group of men behind him also bent down 90 degrees. Then a respectful voice came, "Madam, the master is waiting for you to come home, please come with us. Madam, please come with us." Alang thought that he was neither doing evil nor showing off his power, but was actually very polite. There will definitely be no surprises this time, right? Moreover, he secretly had an idea, which was to mobilize all the most elite bodyguards under the young master. Now that these bodyguards are surrounding them, even if Su Ruo wants to take action, he has to think carefully. It is definitely foolproof. Absolutely foolproof. Sure enough, Su Ruo had no intention of taking action. She just stood there, playing with her cell phone. While playing with it, he also chatted with him, "If I go back with you, how much reward will your master give you?" Alang looked at the phone in Su Ruo's palm and knew that this phone was not a product of the Jiu family. Because Su Ruo didn't have a cell phone at all when she was in the Jiu family. As early as the day of their wedding 3 years ago, the young master gave her cell phone to him and asked him to dispose of it. And this one is obviously the latest one released by China's top brand. Worth 5 figures. Look at the beautiful dress Su Ruo is wearing. Because Jiu Yang was in charge of a fashion brand under the Jiu group, he happened to be in charge of many projects. So he could tell at a glance that the outfit Su Ruo was wearing was a high-end custom-made piece designed by the fashion brand that was a rival of the Jiu group. Worth 6 figures. The young mistress left home last night. Today, not only is she dressed brand new, but her belongings are more than she could ever hope to own. In just one night, what on earth did she do to deserve all of this? Alang observed calmly, but he did not fail to respond to Su Ruo's words, "Madam, you are priceless treasure in the young master's heart. The young master loves you so much that he can't bear to use money to defile you." Su Ruo listened to Alang's words and almost felt so disgusted that she stuffed the phone in her palm into his mouth. He typed the next line of words, clicked send, and then looked at Alang. The moment her clear eyes looked towards him, Alang felt as if a huge rock had fallen on his chest. Su Ruo's red lips opened and closed slightly. Although her voice was light and gentle, when Alang heard the words she said, he couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. Su Ruo said, "My family and I haven't even gotten our divorce certificate yet, but has already been involved with WAN, and there are 3 other girls in the club waiting for him to favor them every day. With this kind of behavior, you still dare to disgust me? Do you think I am blind?" Alang couldn't help but turn pale. Because, even Wanwan might not know about what Jiu Yang did, so how did Su Ruo know? It was obvious that before last night, she had not had any contact with the outside world for 3 years. He was so frightened that he couldn't utter any extra words for a while, and the two sides ended up in a stalemate. Looking at Su Ruo being surrounded through the screen, Xiao Yi was also very curious. Ever since he got up, he heard Wei Dong say that this woman was very powerful. Without seeing it with his own eyes, it was really hard to imagine how strong she was. During the few short hours they spent together, he also realized that Su Ruo was not someone who would suffer any loss. Now that she was surrounded, it was obvious that she was provoked. But she didn't look angry at all. Instead, she started chatting with the other party. Xiao Yi's curiosity grew even more, and he really wanted to see how Su Ruo planned to break through. While he was curious, he didn't notice that his subordinate Wei Dong was looking at a WeChat message on his phone with an increasingly strange look in his eyes. It can even be said to be a hint of awe or even horror. Finally, after Wei Dong calmed down from the strange emotions at first, he weakly handed the phone to Xiao Yi and said, "Master Xiao, what should we do?" Xiao Yi took the phone and looked at it. The moment he saw the content on the phone, even his eyes couldn't help but tremble slightly. The fingers holding the phone tightened involuntarily. Just as he was shocked, the beautiful girl in the tablet slowly raised her head, and her bright eyes met his slightly frightened eyes as if through the screen. Let him make sure that he was indeed discovered by Su Ruo. Then he saw the evil look in her eyes, which made him know that her look meant, "If you don't do what I say, watch out for your life." Xiao Yi smiled, a smile full of murderous intent. "Har har, this woman has threatened me with my life for the second time today." When returning the phone to Wei Dong, Wei Dong was really unsure of what he meant and asked, Master Xiao, what should we do? Mr. Xiao glanced at him coldly. Did she not explain it clearly enough in WeChat? Wei Dong shuddered, feeling that he was being taken out on. It must be that Master Xiao was caught while peeping and now he is embarrassed. He knows everything. Although he was complaining in his heart, his actions were decisive. In a quiet alley. After a brief stalemate between the two sides, Alang first felt that such a stalemate was not a big deal. Putting away all unnecessary emotions, he looked at Su Ruo and said, Madam, tell me, what will it take for you to go back with us? Su Ruo held the phone in her palm and tossed it back and forth, looking at Alang with a half smile in her eyes, and said, When your master is willing to divorce me sincerely, I will naturally go and sign a divorce agreement with him. Now, I don't want to go back, so you can go in first. Chapter 16. Ji Yu Yang regrets for the first time. Come in? Where to go? Alang was confused. But suddenly he remembered that Ji Yu Yang was in the hospital, and said with relief, Young madam, if you don't go back with us, we won't go back to the hospital, and we will always follow you. So, it's up to you to decide. Either you are followed all the time and have no freedom, or you follow us back to the young master. Unexpectedly, Su Ruo just shook her head slightly. I'm not talking about the hospital, but... Looking at the police car gradually approaching from a distance, Su Ruo's eyes flashed with evil. Amid the sudden sound of the ulala alarm, Su Ruo could be heard uttering two words from her thin lips, police. Alang and the others were suddenly confused and looked around in surprise. But just as the group of people turned their heads, a group of police rushed over, knocked Alang and others to the ground and controlled them. A leading police officer said, We received a report from the public that someone tried to humiliate a woman in broad daylight. Fortunately, we arrived in time and took these hooligans back to the police station. You do not say. A group of strong men surrounded a little girl. If they had not arrived late, the little girl would have been bullied immediately. The leading old policeman was frightened for a moment, and walked up to Su Ruo with a much more friendly attitude. Little girl, you. Nonsense, we didn't cause any trouble. She is our young mistress. We followed the master's order to invite her home. We didn't do anything. If you don't believe me, go ask. Our young master is the eldest young master of the GU group. Alang was furious. He had been on guard against Su Ruo in every way possible, but he hadn't expected her to do this. It's not like no one has done this before, but because the young master was backing them up, no one had ever succeeded. Su Ruo. Alang was so angry that he wanted to eat Su Ruo. What a devil! Now I just hope that Mr. Gu's reputation can be useful. The policeman was interrupted when he was talking to Su Ruo. He frowned and saw how ferocious they looked. He knew without any interrogation that Alang and his gang were definitely the thieves crying, Stop thieves. They even brought up the eldest son of the GU group. Oh, do you really think that the eldest son of the GU group has such a good reputation? In the past, all cases related to the eldest son of the GU group were always suppressed and ended up in nothing. This time when he went out, his leader was very encouraging to him. So when faced with Alang's dissatisfaction, he just said sternly, Take him back for trial. Then, regardless of the struggles of Alang and the others, he was finally taken away. However, the old policeman became kind again when facing Su Ruo. Little girl, please come with us to make a statement. What do you think? You just need to make a statement and then you can leave. Su Ruo showed a faint smile and nodded, okay. Then he followed the police. But before getting on the car, Su Ruo looked back and seemed to smile faintly towards the sky. The lip movements clearly said, Thank you very much. I'll come to see you tomorrow. After saying this, he got in the car, closed the door and left. After discerning Su Ruo's lip shape, Xiao Yi smiled again. This is the first time I've seen a woman so cunning. He thought he could observe the woman's flaws in secret, but before he could observe the flaws, he was discovered first. Not only was he discovered, but he was also dragged into her affairs. And in the end, he didn't get any useful information, but instead had to contribute to her trouble. Oh. Xiao Yi sneered and closed the tablet with a snap. Thinking that all these troubles were caused by Ji Yu Yang, he was afraid that Ji Yu Yang would send someone to find trouble with him soon. After all, his men had pressed Ji Yu Yang to the ground and robbed him. Therefore, we must find something for Ji Yu Yang to do. This also includes the promise to give this hospital to Su Ruo, which also needs to be arranged. After giving Wei Dong a series of orders, he closed his eyes and prepared to rest. As soon as he closed his eyes, what appeared before his eyes was either Su Ruo smiling or Su Ruo looking slightly angry. A woman appeared in his mind, so vivid. The most annoying thing is that it still lingers. His closed eyes suddenly opened, and there was an inexplicable hint of anger and annoyance in his eyes. But at this moment, Ji Yang was even angrier and more annoyed than Xiao Yi. Within just 10 minutes, he not only received a reply from Alang, saying that not only did he fail to catch Su Ruo, but Su Ruo had sent him to the police station and he needed to bail him out. Soon after, even his grandmother, whom he feared the most and who had a firm grip on him, sent him a message: "You bastard, I'll give you 1 week. If you don't bring Su Ruo home, you can't come back to this house." Ji Yan was panicked when he saw the news. He has not yet completely established his foothold in the Ji family. If the old woman wants to do something, he really has no power to resist at all. So at this moment he couldn't care about his half-disfigured face, nor could he care about Wanwan who was lying on the bed looking pitiful, nor could he care about the girl who had just glanced at him and the man in the ward at the end of the corridor who dared to throw him out. Hearing Alang say Su Ruo was also in the police station, he casually threw on a piece of clothing and rushed into the police station. Facing Wanwan's nervous questioning, he just perfunctorily said, "You stay in the hospital obediently. I'm going to look for Su Ruo." Then he disappeared. Wanwan heard the name Su Ruo again, and Ji Yang had already left the ward. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. She was so angry that she slapped the cup on the bedside and gnashed her teeth. "Su Ruo. Su Ruo. Su Ruo again. Su Ruo again. Why don't you just die? Why isn't it you who should die?" God knows she was supposed to deal with Su Ruo yesterday, but somehow she was the one who got into a car accident. This made her extremely angry. That was not enough, even Ji Yang, who had always been on her side, had only Su Ruo in his mind. She was so angry that her face was twisted. But soon, she calmed down and murmured to herself, "No, I can't just sit there and wait for death, absolutely not." When Su Ruo finished taking the statement and was about to leave the police station, she saw Ji Yang's car roaring towards them. There was no doubt that the person he was looking for was definitely me. So she hailed a taxi and got in. Sure enough, when Ji Yang arrived, he started yelling at the police officers who were leaving to handle the case, "Where is Su Ruo? Where is Su Ruo?" This policeman was the one who took Su Ruo's statement. He chased out to ask Su Ruo if she needed his help to call a taxi. Who knew that as soon as he came out, he was almost grabbed by the collar by a madman. Naturally, he didn't have a good attitude and said coldly, "She left long ago after taking the statement." Then he turned around and walked back. Seeing how scary this man is, he definitely can't cause trouble for the little girl. Ji Yang was so angry that he turned around in circles and almost exploded. This was the first time he regretted not giving Su Ruo a cell phone. If he had given Su Ruo a cell phone, how come she couldn't find him? Chapter 17, Windfall. Su Ruo sat in the taxi and admired Ji Yang's angry expression for a while before she calmly said to the driver, "Drive." She cannot let herself be wronged now. As for Ji Yang, he will be furious to death. When Su Ruo returned to their hotel after dinner, she received a message from Wei Dong. It was the electronic contract for the equity transfer of the hospital where Xiao Yi lived. As long as she confirmed and signed it, the hospital would belong to her completely from then on. He replied approvingly, "Not bad." Then he checked the contract, and finding nothing wrong with it, he signed his name decisively. Well, after traveling through the book, she finally had her first property. Then she can take action against those who take advantage of her for free. Before she could act, her phone vibrated again. It was a message from an unfamiliar number: "Dear Miss Su Ruo, we have cleaned your villa for you and you can move in at any time. I am your exclusive housekeeper. If you have any needs, please tell me at any time. I will serve you 24 hours a day." Seeing this message, Su Ruo couldn't help but frown. Where did she get the villa? Just as I was thinking about this, a flash of inspiration suddenly flashed through my mind. If she remembered correctly, she seemed to hear a jingling sound in her head before going to bed last night. Now, as she pondered, there is indeed more information in my mind. The Nanshan Bay Villa complex is owned by the Nanzi Group, which is now owned by Miss Su Ruo. The 10 billion in the bank card belongs to Miss Su Ruo. The world's top 3 black cards belong to Miss Su Ruo. A set of silver needles handed down from ancient times belongs to Miss Su Ruo. The only young master of an ancient martial arts family in the world belongs to Miss Su Ruo. There are a number of other UN unlocked benefits, which will be unlocked at the right time and belong to Miss Su Ruo. Su Ruo was surprised. Where did she get so many rewards? After tracing the source for a long time, I finally realized that these things all fell out of the system. Because she destroyed the system, all the benefits that were stored in the system to tempt her also belonged to her. After checking, he found that there were indeed 3 black cards, a set of silver needles and a set of relevant information about Nanzi Group in his bag. There was also an extra bank card in the bag. After checking, there was indeed 10 billion in the card. But there is also a young master from an ancient martial arts family. What is this thing? Where can she go to check it? Su Ruo, who did not show up, was quickly forgotten. She was certainly happy to have so much unexpected wealth, but she just thought that the system was so insidious and not a good thing. How credible were these unexpected wealth that fell from it? However, after checking the silver needle, he found nothing unusual, so he took photos of the rest of the things and sent them to Wei Dong, asking him to help check whether the rest of the things were fake or not. But she didn't know that. When Wei Dong saw that the Nanshan Bei Villa belonged to the Nanji Group owned by Su Ruo and that the 3 world-class black cards were also owned by Su Ruo, he was instantly in awe and hurried to report to Xiao Yi. Master Xiao, do you still remember that you asked your subordinates to find out which boss won the bid and developed the Nanshan Bei Villa in Nancheng? There are also 3 top-level black cards missing and their whereabouts cannot be found. There is no need to check. Whether it is the ownership of Nanshan Bei Villa or the ownership of the 3 black cards, they all belong to Miss Su Ruo. When Xiao Yi heard Wei Dong's words, he was extremely surprised. How did you know? Wei Dong showed Xiao Yi the message Su Ruo sent him. Xiao Yi saw that Su Ruo was straightforward and didn't hide anything at all. Help me check whether these contract information is credible or not. His eyebrows couldn't help but jump fiercely. It's her own thing, why is she still doubting it? Wei Dong couldn't figure it out either. But he had another question, so he wrote back to Su Ruo in front of Xiao Yi and asked. Ms. Su Ruo, you can look it up yourself. I'm afraid it's not a good idea to give me such important information, right? This was also what Xiao Yi thought. This woman had basically laid out all her family assets in front of him. Wasn't she afraid that he would do something bad to her? But he soon received a reply from Su Ruo. I don't think it's troublesome, just check it, I believe you. Wei Dong handed the phone to Xiao Yi. Xiao Yi's gaze remained on the screen for a long time. Reason told him that there must be something wrong when things were abnormal. There is no trust without reason, and no giving without reason. But this time it was obvious that Su Ruo's handle was in his hand. If he had any intentions, Su Ruo would have no chance of getting away with it. Even he himself didn't know that his eyes had been fixed on the word believe for a long time. Then he said calmly, she asked you to check, so just help her check. Before going to bed at night, Su Ruo received a reply from Wei Dong. Miss Su Ruo, there is nothing unusual. I heard that Nanshan Bei Villa will be launched next week. Can you reserve one for us, Mr. Xiao? It must be a formal transaction, and I will never take advantage of you. This Nanshan Bei Villa was won by a mysterious real estate company 5 years ago and began to be developed. According to market rules, developers will basically start selling pre-sale properties soon after they acquire the land and build houses. Very few houses are built and then sold. Nanshan Bei Villa is one of those few. Also, because of Nanshan Bei Villa's previous promotion of high-end living experience, the good land area and high investment, the most important thing is that it is sold as a ready-made property. Although it has not opened yet, the popularity has been hyped up. Whether for living or investment, those who have the ability are actually waiting for the launch of Nanshan Bei Villas next week. Also, because the developer behind the Nanshan Bei Villas is too mysterious, many celebrities are unable to use their connections to get in through the back door. But the status of Nanshan Bei has been completely hyped up, and it would be a bit embarrassing if you fail to grab one by then. How can I buy a villa in Nanshan Bei? It is currently very popular in Nancheng. Xiao Yi had thought that the environment of Nanshan Bei Villa was good after seeing it long ago, and it would be perfect for him to buy one and give it to the person he wanted to give it to. So when Wei Dong knew that the big boss behind Nanshan Bei was right next to him, he directly asked to buy a house. Su Ruo had also received a call from the person in charge of the sales department before. Now that Wei Dong had confirmed with her that it was indeed no fraud, she was completely relieved. I sent the sales manager's WeChat to Wei Dong, just negotiate with him. She greeted the sales manager and then didn't ask any more questions. Before she traveled through their book, she had participated in more than one real estate development project larger than Nanshan Bay Villa. So when she inexplicably acquired the Nanzi Group, she naturally did not show any fear. She was wondering where to live, and this place was bought a week before the villa was put on the market. This villa area in the best area in the South City saved her the trouble of looking for a house. Chapter 18. I am her mother, her biological mother. Early the next morning, Su Ruo prepared medicinal porridge for Xiao Yi and brought it to the hospital as usual. Although she had acquired a set of so-called silver needles passed down from ancient times. But for someone like her, whose medical skills have basically reached the pinnacle, external tools are secondary. The most important thing is her own ability and her energy. On the contrary, the ancient silver needles are just gimmicks. They can be auctioned for money if there is a chance, but as for their use, they are really useless. So she treated Xiao Yi the same way she had treated him before. After all the needles were taken out, she checked Xiao Yi's body again, her eyes lit up involuntarily. Master Xiao, your recovery is faster than I expected. You will take the Chinese medicine according to the prescription I gave you for a month. After a month, I will give you 3 more acupuncture treatments and your body will be fully recovered. When it came to Xiao Yi's condition, Su Ruo was quite serious. Not only did he carefully instruct Xiao Yi on the precautions to take in the next month, he also carefully wrote several prescriptions for him. The specific method of decocting the medicine and the time of taking it are also marked on the prescription. Su Ruo suddenly became serious and solemn, which seemed a little unreal in Xiao Yi's eyes. But his body was indeed becoming more and more relaxed, and it was also telling him that Su Ruo was not joking with his body. His gaze involuntarily fell on Su Ruo, with a hint of inquiry in his eyes. After Su Ruo finished writing the prescription, she handed it to Wei Dong. Wei Dong glanced over and found that there were basically only 4 or 5 medicines on each piece of rice paper. Although he doesn't understand Chinese medicine, he has the impression that everyone who takes Chinese medicine holds a big bag of it. I couldn't help but ask, Miss Su, are there only these few medicines? Don't they need to be adjusted in the middle? Su Ruo raised her eyebrows and said, first, don't compare me with other quack doctors. Second, you have to worry that your master Xiao might have unexpected health problems during the journey. Having said this, Su Ruo paused and looked at Xiao Yi with a smile. As soon as this smile appeared, Xiao Yi's heart slowly settled down. This nonchalant look is just right, and it fits the temperament of this sinister woman. Being serious and solemn is really scary. So when Su Ruo said the next words, he didn't have any extra emotions. Su Ruo continued, we will be neighbors from now on anyway. If you need to worry about your health going wrong or a sudden attack, you can always come to me next door as long as the funds are in place. Xiao Yi curled his lips, I'm afraid there won't be such an opportunity. Su Ruo smiled and replied, you have confidence in me, thank you very much. As he spoke, those persistent and dense gazes fell on Xiao Yi's face again, like a spider's web, trying to trap him. It's really too overwhelming. Xiao Yi's deep eyes fell on Su Ruo's face, meaning that she should be more restrained, but he opened his mouth and said, what do you want as payment for this treatment? From the pressure and alienation in Xiao Yi's eyes, it was obvious that he was reminding her that it would be better not to say things like her target was him. Su Ruo understood Xiao Yi's eyes, even the warning in them. Instead of being annoyed, her smile deepened. Her target was originally Xiao Yi. If he wasn't Xiao Yi, why would she take action? But Xiao Yi obviously didn't buy it. So, she shook her head and said, I haven't thought about it yet. How about you give me a year or 2 to think about it carefully? Xiao Yi's eyes became deeper, and he looked at Su Ruo, feeling pressured. Su Ruo looked frightened and spread her hands. It's no use being rude. I haven't made up my mind yet. Even if I did, you wouldn't agree. I don't need money or anything like that. What do you want me to do? After saying this, she looked back at Xiao Yi innocently. She was also certain that he would never turn against her, but she was indeed helpless. Wei Dong looked at his own master Xiao's helpless and almost frowning expression, and the corners of his mouth curled up again. He told her, I'm afraid there won't be another person besides Miss Su Ruo who can make Mr. Xiao so obedient. Su Ruo knew when to stop and was about to get up and leave. Just stood up. With a loud bang, the door was violently slammed open by someone from outside. Along with the sound of the door being smashed open, a sharp and shrill woman's cry was heard. Su Ruo, you bastard, it's been 3 years, 3 whole years and you are, let me go, let me go. Several people looked outside the ward. A fat woman who was planning to curse was caught by Xiao Yi's bodyguard and was about to be dragged out. Behind the fat woman, there is a middle-aged man. Just by looking at their ferocious faces, one can tell that they are husband and wife. And this couple obviously came here for Su Ruo. Originally, Xiao Yi dismissed his bodyguards in order to hook the fish that wanted to harm him, but he failed to catch the spy. Instead, both waves of conflicts were caused by Su Ruo. It seems that Su Ruo's life is more exciting than his. Yes, when the woman was covered with her mouth by Xiao Yi's men and was about to be dragged away. The woman bit the bodyguard's hand hard, struggled to break free from him, lunged forward, hugged the door frame tightly, and stared at the glamorous Su Ruo in the room, her eyes bursting with the light of a hungry wolf. I'm her mother, her biological mother. How dare you do anything to me? How dare you do anything to me? The middle-aged man also stepped forward and stood beside the woman. Although he didn't say a word, the evil look in his eyes as he stared at Su Ruo was still heart-wrenching. The bodyguards stood in the corridor, suddenly not knowing what to do. If they are outsiders, they will be thrown out. But these two people are the biological parents of Mr. Xiao's savior. Even though such biological parents are useless. But after all, it is Miss Su Ruo's family affair, and they have no say in it. Even Wei Dong looked at Su Ruo with a pair of nervous eyes. If he remembered correctly, from the information he had found, every time Miss Su Ruo faced her biological parents, she was helpless but always respectful. At this moment, although he really wanted to throw this pair of parents who looked so bad out for Su Ruo, he still had to respect Su Ruo's wishes. Even Xiao Yi frowned at this moment. Although he didn't like this kind of occasion, he still held back. As a result, the couple thought that it was their own aura that threatened and intimidated these people. The two were not as nervous as they were when they were first caught by the bodyguards. Su Ruo's mother Zhang Erhua rolled her eyes. After seeing Su Ruo in her dazzlingly beautiful clothes, the breathtakingly good-looking young man beside her, and the obviously luxurious layout of this ward, the flames of jealousy and ferocity in his eyes suddenly ignited, and he growled at Su Ruo with gnashing teeth. You stupid girl, there has been no news from you for 3 years. It turns out you have hooked up with a rich man again and are enjoying the good life. Chapter 19. The oxygen mask was removed. Su Ruo's father, Su Daong, couldn't help but light up his eyes when he saw that the daughter he had raised since childhood was 1,000 times or 10,000 times more beautiful than the stars on TV 3 years after their marriage. His logic is simple. In the past, when Su Ruo was in their house, because the family had little money and they mainly had to take care of the lives of the 3 of them, they basically didn't take Su Ruo seriously. So even though she looked pretty, that beauty looked dull. How could it be so bright and beautiful as it is now? When she stood there, it was just like an incandescent light being turned on. So it is enough to prove that in the 3 years when they couldn't contact her, she lived very, very well. But he and his wife can't both be so fierce to each other. Otherwise, they would not get any benefit from Su Ruo, and even less from the man next to her. Su Daong walked in from outside the ward with a smile on his face. As he walked, he asked Su Ruo with a smile. Xiao Ruo, where have you been for the past 3 years? Mom and Dad are very worried about you, and your brother misses you very much too. If you dare to take another step forward, I will chop off your legs immediately. Before Su Daong could finish his words, Su Ruo spoke first. Obviously, the smiling expression on Su Ruo's face didn't change at all, and the curve of the dimples on her lips didn't diminish at all. But when her vague glance swept over him, Su Daong, who was standing at the door of the ward, really didn't dare to take another step forward. I just felt my legs were chilly. Su Ruo knew that in the original book, they had been looking for Su Ruo for 3 years, but their purpose was not to care about whether Su Ruo was doing well. But, Su Ruo married into a wealthy family, but in the past 3 years, they haven't enjoyed any blessings from her. This is extremely infuriating. So now that they have found her, they naturally want to enjoy all the blessings they have not enjoyed in the past at once. Whether it is Su Daong or Zhang Erhua, their ambitions are clearly written in their eyes. There is actually this scene in the book. On the night of the original owner's divorce, she was knocked out by Wanwan, and her wound was stepped on hard by Wanwan, causing her to faint from the pain. In fact, the original owner was not saved that whole night. When he was finally sent to the hospital by a kind-hearted person the next day, he was basically struggling on the brink of life and death because of the delay. It took 2 days and 2 nights of rescue before he was out of danger. To say that he is out of danger means that he is under careful care and waiting for the 3-day observation period to pass. If she is not taken good care of during the observation period, she may die at any time. Yes, during the observation period. The couple broke into their hospital, broke into Su Ruo's ward, stood beside her bed, and demanded money from her in a ferocious manner. They know it. Su Ruo was dumped by a rich young man and was given 1 million as compensation. When they heard about the 1 million, they were like vicious dogs hearing about meat and bones, and they ate in a disgusting way. The original owner had not even taken off his oxygen mask at the time, and he felt a little touched when he saw his parents coming. I thought my parents knew that I was injured and had no one to take care of me, so they came to care for me. In the end, they grabbed her oxygen mask and threatened her, "You damn woman, it's been 3 years and there's been no news at all. Do you want to die outside? If you die outside, the money on you will also be ours. Take it out, 1 million, take it out. If you don't take it out, we will take off your oxygen mask and let you go to hell." As the closest person in the world, no one asked her whether her marriage was going well in the past 3 years. No one asked her how seriously she was injured. No one asked who hurt her or sought justice for her. There were only 2 vicious faces, threatening in a vicious voice, "If you don't pay 1 million, I will take off your oxygen mask." The original owner was lying on the hospital bed, and his heart was dead in an instant. If it weren't for her best friend and first love who had been keeping an eye on her condition, she would have rushed to the hospital with her parents immediately. Otherwise, the original owner's oxygen mask might really be taken off. Even so, the bank card that Ji Yuyan gave her was still snatched away by them. Even the medical expenses were paid by my best friend and my first love. When Su Ruo thought of the plots in the books, she couldn't help but clench her fists. Looking at the couple in front of me, the traces of wind and frost left on their dark faces are like the stench inside them floating on the surface. There was a slight flash of indifference in Su Ruo's eyes, and she leaned towards Xiao Yi with an indescribable intimacy and attachment. There was also a hint of sweetness in her voice. "There are some things I wanted to inform you of, and now that you are here, it's just right. To be honest with you, I divorced Ji Yu Yang from the Ji Yu family last night because I fell in love with the guy next to me. Not only do I love him, but he also loves me. None of this is important. Do you know what is most important?" As Su Ruo spoke, she looked towards Su Daong and Zhang Ahua with seemingly shy eyes, waiting for their response. The 2 stood at the door, looked at Su Ruo, then looked at Xiao Yi, and shook their heads. "Girl, what do you think?" Su Ruo lowered her head shyly, playing with an accessory on her clothes and said, "Because Brother Xiao not only loves me, but is also rich. He's super rich, you know." As she spoke, she glanced at Xiao Yi quickly and continued, "Even if there were 10 Ji Yu families, none of them would be as rich as Brother Xiao. So, I'll just be with Brother Xiao. You know I'm doing very well now, so just leave quickly. Because my Brother Xiao is good in every way except his temper. If he gets angry and wants to throw you out, I'm afraid nothing I say will be of any use." As Su Ruo spoke, she seemed very scared. She suddenly stretched out her hand and pinched Xiao Yi's sleeve. She even looked at Xiao Yi timidly, as if she was really afraid that he would get angry and lose his temper. The woman is used to being treacherous, and now she reveals a bit of timidity. Even though I know she is pretending, I still feel a bit of pity for her. Naturally, Xiao Yi felt that I was pitiful. Wei Dong watched from the side and once again looked up at the sky in silence. Miss Su Ruo is good in every way except her acting, which is so fake. There are too many bugs. Only a fool would believe this movie. But Zhang Ahua and Su Daong believed it. Su Ruo also knew that they would believe it. They are not fools, they are just too greedy. And Su Ruo knew very well how to deal with a pair of greedy people. As long as they can see the mountains of gold and silver ahead of them, it seems that they can own them if they just run a little bit forward. But no matter how much they ran, even if their feet were broken, they could never get close to the mountains of gold and silver. This is the cruelest torture for them. It is much more lethal than beating them up or scolding them. Chapter 20. It turns out that Mr. Xiao likes this one. As soon as Su Ruo finished these shy and timid words, Zhang Ahua and Su Daong were both. A dark and ugly face instantly turned to Xiao Yi, and said something shocking. "Son-in-law, I'm Sheruo's mother, your mother-in-law. Yes, son-in-law, I am your father-in-law. Is our Su Ruo obedient? If she is not obedient, you can beat her at any time until she obeys. As the two of them were talking, they didn't notice any unnecessary fluctuations in Xiao Yi's expression. They were delighted and walked towards the ward. Opening his mouth, he continued, "Son-in-law, since you are marrying me, Su Ruo, then we will be a family from now on. We also have a son, who is your brother-in-law. How about you prepare a banquet at that 7-star hotel tonight, and we will bring your brother-in-law to you to meet him. Yes, your brother-in-law is also a businessman, so you must be a businessman too, right? You two must have something to talk about when you are together." As they were talking, they had already stepped into the ward. Although they had entered, there was always an inexplicable oppressive force in the air, which made them dare not take another step forward. So the two of them stood in the middle of the ward and started performing a duet. Xiao Yi's eyes did not move. He seemed to have heard their words, but also seemed not to have heard them. Until the two of them had a chance to catch their breath, he reached out to Su Ruo, who was looking at him lovingly, and pulled her into his arms. Su Ruo didn't react at all, and she had already fallen into Xiao Yi's arms. And Xiao Yi pressed his head against his chest. Then, Xiao Yi's voice was heard, "Are you Ruoer's biological parents?" When the two saw how affectionate the couple was, they actually showed their love in front of them. "This is so joyful, I am so happy that I want to slap my thighs." The two of them nodded repeatedly, "Yes, yes, yes, we are Su Ruo's biological parents." Biological parents? A slight curve appeared on Xiao Yi's lips, and he could feel the stiff body of the little woman pressed in his arms. As if he wanted to push them away, but was reluctant to do so, he placed those hands against his chest and froze. This inexplicably reminded him of yesterday. This little woman acted like an experienced person when flirting with people, but he didn't expect that she was only good at talking. When it comes to real things, she gets scared. If Su Ruo knew what he was thinking, she would definitely roar. It was obvious that happiness came too suddenly, and she couldn't react for a while, so she was stunned for a moment. Xiao Yi actually questioned her for being a coward. This is about a woman's dignity, and she must not give in at all. Unfortunately, she didn't know, and could only nestle in Xiao Yi's arms, an embrace that was broad, warm, and inexplicably greedy. She felt Xiao Yi stroking the back of her head again and again, just like stroking a cat. She listened to Xiao Yi continue in his bone-chilling voice. "Ruoer is as beautiful as a fairy, and the two of you look. Forget it, just give me an address first, and then go home and wait for my news. I need to investigate now. If I find out that Ruoer and you are indeed your biological relatives, I will immediately offer a betrothal gift of 10 billion yuan and personally marry Ruoer from you. But if not, I need to investigate how you treated my Ruoer in the past. If you slapped her once, I would slap her back 100 times. If you withheld one bite of food from her, I would withhold 10 meals of food from you. You don't have to be nervous. Although the Xiao group may not have other abilities, it is capable of investigating some things. Wei Dong, go call the doctor now to draw blood from Ruoer and these two elderly people." Wei Dong looked at Miss Su Ruo being held in Mr. Xiao's arms like a cat, his eyes sparkling again and again. He was sighing with emotion. "I finally know, it turns out that Xiao Yi likes this one, the White Lotus one that I still pity tilde. Then I got this order." He happily responded, "Yes." Then he ran out quickly. In fact, he didn't go to find a doctor. He knew that Mr. Xiao was playing a trick on him, so he naturally had to cooperate. Well, as long as your acting skills can't be worse than Miss Su Ruo's. But Zhang Ahuer and Su Daong didn't care whether his acting was genuine or not. When he heard Xiao Yi's words and saw Xiao Yi's loving behavior towards Su Ruo like petting a cat, they knew that this man really loved Su Ruo. Just like the guy with the scar on the east end of the village loves his wife. Scar burned, killed and robbed outside, but when he returned home, he wanted to hold his wife in his hands and cherish her like the apple of his eye. If his wife gets bullied, the person who bullies his wife, that would be pitiful. Now Xiao Yi's eyes and behavior are exactly the same as Scar's. Even more vicious than Scar. In the past, not to mention slapping Su Ruo, they almost beat her to death several times. If she hadn't been lucky, she would have died long ago. When it comes to eating, Su Ruo always eats what they leave behind, and they even force Su Ruo to lick the table. Thinking of this, the couple panicked. They had no time to ask for money or leave their address. They had to think carefully and must not let this man call a doctor. Otherwise the couple would be dead. Thinking of this, they quickly changed their expressions. "Oh son-in-law, I seem to have something else to do, so I'll leave first." "Yes, son-in-law. I'm leaving now. See you next time." As they were talking, they turned around hastily and were about to run. Now that it has been confirmed that the dead woman is living a better life, it won't be too late to catch her and threaten her when she is alone. At this time, Su Ruo finally recovered and raised her head from Xiao Yi's arms. She originally wanted to leave Xiao Yi's embrace, but Xiao Yi held her too tightly, so she could only raise her head and said coldly, "Wait." How could the two dare to slow down? They quickened their pace and ran wildly. Su Ruo grabbed a silver needle nearby and was about to attack, but Wei Dong had already raised his foot, and then par tilde. Ouch tilde. Ouch tilde. The two had tripped and fell to the ground, screaming in pain. Su Ruo also nestled in Xiao Yi's arms and spoke slowly, "How did you know I was here?" The two looked at each other and didn't want to answer. Xiao Yi started petting the cat again. Oh no, he started patting the cat's head again. If Ruor asked someone and he ignored her, then I'm afraid there would be no need for his tongue. As Xiao Yi finished speaking, a large group of bodyguards came over, holding knives in their hands. Su Deong was so scared that he quickly took out his mobile phone. "We received a message, it's a message." Wei Dong took it, memoized the signal code, and then began to search. Seeing that there seemed to be no more danger, the two turned around and glared at Su Ruo, then stood up and ran away again. Wei Dong seemed to be looking up a phone number, but his foot was stretched out again. Then there were a few more screams and snapping sounds. The couple literally rolled and crawled forward. Because the fall happened so suddenly, several of my teeth were broken and the screen of my phone was shattered into pieces. He kept yelling and screaming, and I couldn't tell whether it was because of physical pain or heartache. But the couple made up their minds at the same time that they would get double the revenge from Su Ruo, the dead woman, in a few days for the suffering they suffered today. Chapter 21, Skin the Freeloader. When the couple's voices became farther and farther away, someone suddenly closed the door of the ward with a click. At this moment, even Wei Dong left the ward. There was only a pin-drop silence in the ward. And two men and women hugging each other. In this way, the sound of Xiao Yi's pounding heart and Su Ruo's breathing seemed especially clear. When the surroundings are quiet, perception becomes particularly clear. Xiao Yi could clearly feel that the body in his arms seemed too soft. The breath that entered my nostrils seemed too sweet. Just now, it was just because this woman kept teasing him, and he wanted to retaliate without thinking. But there are so many people who still don't feel anything. Everyone had left, and he didn't know whether he should let go or what to do. Just when Xiao Yi was struggling with his conscience, he didn't even feel his chest getting colder, and colder again. It was Su Ruo, nestled in his arms, unbuttoning his chest one by one. He had a fox-like smile on his face, as if a big bad wolf had taken a fancy to the little lamb and was about to eat it bite by bite. Unbutton his shirt. But what I was thinking in my heart was that Xiao Yi seemed to have a pretty good figure. Even through the fabric I could feel the hardness of his chest and the curve of his abdominal muscles. Therefore, she must see his abdominal muscles with her own eyes, and it would be best if she could touch them with her own hands tilde. Until the last button was unbuttoned and the clothes slid backwards, a cool breeze and a slightly cold touch made Xiao Yi come back to his senses. Look down. Not only did her clothes get pulled off by this lustful woman, but she even stretched out a finger and pressed it on her abdomen. Seeing how devoted she was, one could hardly wait to reach out her hands and touch her. As a man, I was teased by a woman like this. Xiao Yi clenched his teeth. The fist hardened. He reached out and fiercely grabbed Su Ruo's hands that were covering his abdominal muscles. All the messy thoughts in his mind disappeared, and he threw Su Ruo aside. He pulled up the quilt to cover his half-naked body. At this moment, he clearly saw a hint of regret in Su Ruo's eyes. Looking at the abdominal muscles covered by him, a look of regret appeared on his face. Xiao Yi's face turned even darker, and he almost squeezed out two words from between his teeth, Su Ruo. When Su Ruo looked up, she met Xiao Yi's eyes, which were filled with terrible storms. Just looking at the storm in his eyes, I'm afraid everyone would be scared. But Su Ruo was not afraid at all. Instead she laughed, Master Xiao, one day, I must touch your abdominal muscles with my own hands. I won't bother you now, by tilde. Having said that, the female hooligan pulled the door open, walked out, and considerately closed the door again. Then there were two bangs. It was obvious that Xiao Yi was very angry and smashed something on the door. The noise frightened Wei Dong. He looked at Su Ruo suspiciously, wondering what she had done to make Master Xiao so angry, and yet she was still alive. It turned out that Su Ruo was not afraid at all. Instead, there was a smile on her face, just like a cat that had successfully stolen some fish. Yes, although she didn't touch Xiao Yi's abdominal muscles, she had confirmed that Xiao Yi really had 8-pack abdominal muscles. Definitely, there was no way to escape. Greedy tilde, really greedy tilde. When she raised her eyes and met Wei Dong's curious gaze, she immediately put away all the expressions on her face and asked, "Have you found out?" Wei Dong met Su Ruo's cold eyes, shuddered, and nodded, "Yes, I found out that it was a person named Ning Wan who instigated behind the scenes." Ning Wan is the name of Gu Yang's White Moonlight Wan. The investigation results were indeed consistent with Su Ruo's guess. In the book, the original owner was hospitalized, and the couple went to the hospital and threatened to take off the original owner's oxygen mask. It was Ning Wan who told Zhang Erhua and the others that the original owner had obtained $1 million in divorce property. Unexpectedly, when she came through the book and even Ji Yuyan was unable to notice her in the dark, Ning Wan not only knew she was here, but also arranged this to disgust her. Su Ruo's eyes gradually showed murderous intent. Suddenly remembering that Ning Wanqi was in the next ward, the murderous intent in Su Ruo's eyes was replaced by a faint smile. Little by little, this smile became increasingly enchanting. Instead of leaving, he reopened the ward, smiled faintly at Xiao Yi on the bed, and said politely, "Master Xiao, I want to borrow something." As she spoke, she entered the room, pulled out a woolen rope from the corner, and waved it towards Xiao Yi. "I know you haven't found out who's behind the attack on you in the past few days. Your body has almost recovered now. There's no point in you staying here. You will definitely be discharged soon. So I'll take this bundle of rope and I want to return it to you. Goodbye, Master Xiao, we'll see you in the rivers and lakes tilde." Su Ruo said this, smiled at Xiao Yi, and without paying any attention to his stinky expression, she left the ward. Wei Dong subconsciously asked, "Miss Su Ruo, where are you going?" Su Ruo didn't even turn her head and shook the rope in her hand. "Go and skin the freeloader." Having said that, she walked away. Only then did Wei Dong dare to take a tentative look into the ward. The first thing he saw was the two vases on the ground that were smashed by Xiao Yi. He felt that Xiao Yi might not want to smash the vases, but Su Ruo's head. When he saw Xiao Yi's expression at that moment, a terrifying expression as if a storm was about to come, his legs went weak. I thought to myself, Miss Su is really capable. Miss Su is probably the only one who can still be alive and well even after making Mr. Xiao so angry. But he didn't dare to show it on the surface, and just asked weakly, "Master Xiao, what should we do next?" Xiao Yi exhaled slowly. He was not angry because of being teased by Su Ruo. What made him angry was that he, who had always been calm, was actually provoked by Su Ruo. If he had thrown Su Ruo out a little later, someone as smart as Su Ruo would probably have immediately noticed his body's reaction because of her. I still don't know what this woman is carrying, and I don't know if she is really an enemy or a friend. I originally wanted to teach her a lesson. As a result, I didn't understand thoroughly what I should have understood. The lesson that should have been taught was not taught. He actually reacted first. How can I not be angry? Now when Wei Dong asked the question, what flashed before his eyes was Su Ruo's expression, smiling like a fox. And the message in her eyes that she was interested in him was not concealed at all. He even thought of what Wei Dong had told him about how bad Su Ruo's past had been, and saw her parents' obviously weird behavior just now, and then saw her holding a bundle of ropes and saying she was going to skin someone. He actually felt a little worried in his heart. Worried about whether she will suffer a loss. After all, although Wei Dong said how strong Su Ruo's fighting skills were, he had not seen it with his own eyes. He saw it with his own eyes, or it was this woman who asked Wei Dong to call the police. Or they used a beauty trap to lure you into their arms and then kill you with a borrowed knife. With such little courage, who else would she want to skin herself? Isn't she just sending herself to be skinned by others? Thinking of this, Xiao Yi was furious again, staring at Wei Dong and said unhappily, "She said she was going to skin someone, and you let her go alone. If she gets skinned by someone else, who will treat me?" Yes, he was definitely just worried that if she had an accident, his body would not be able to fully recover and he would probably be buried with her. Chapter 22. It seems that we don't need to take action. Wei Dong was a little confused by the yelling. Why did he feel that Mr. Xiao was concerned about Miss Su Ruo? And seemed to be worried that Miss Su Ruo would be bullied? But is it possible? Miss Su Ruo is good if she doesn't bully others, but she is bullied? He responded, "Okay, Master Xiao, I will arrange for my men to follow Miss Su Ruo now." He also opened the tablet and let Xiao Yi take a look at it himself. Miss Su Ruo's fighting ability does not need to be protected. As early as when Zhang Erhuer and his wife came to Xiao Yi's ward to cause trouble, Ning Wan opened the door of the ward a crack, and then stood behind the door to peek into the ward at the end of the corridor. Yes, when Ji Yang was still unfamiliar with Su Ruo, Ning Wan already knew that the woman who was as beautiful as a fairy was Su Ruo. Judging from Ji Yang's reaction over the past 2 days, it seems like he has fallen in love with that bitch Su Ruo all over again. On the surface, Ji Yang seemed like a vicious monster and ordered people to capture Su Ruo and torture her severely. But she also knew that although Ji Yang had married Su Ruo all these years, he had never touched Su Ruo because of her coldness and lack of interest. But this time, she clearly saw Ji Yang's desire for Su Ruo from his eyes. If she wanted to hit Su Ruo with her car before, it was because she was jealous of Su Ruo for taking the position that should have belonged to her in the past 3 years. This time she contacted Zhang Erhuer and his wife because she hated Su Ruo completely and wanted to get rid of her. Because she had also asked the doctor, there was an important person in the ward at the end of the corridor. A big shot that even Ji Yang can't afford to offend. But Su Ruo went to that ward for 2 days in a row, looking very proud of herself. Therefore, it was most appropriate to use the vulgar Zhang Erhuer couple to cause trouble. But who knew that the result of Zhang Erhuer and his wife's trouble would not be seeing Su Ruo being thrown out by that big shot? Instead, Zhang Erhuer and his wife were in a miserable state as they fled, tumbling and crawling like dogs that had lost their homes. Zhang Erhuer and her husband were so terrified that they basically crawled through the door of her ward. Along the way, there was blood flowing from their broken teeth, and they looked disgusting and miserable. Ning Wan thought that his plan was foolproof, but it failed. She was so angry that she couldn't help but slam the door and sat on the edge of the bed with a gloomy expression. Thinking about how Ji Yang hadn't come to his ward since last night in order to look for Su Ruo, and if Ji Yang came now and saw Su Ruo, she was a little afraid to think about the consequences. After thinking for a moment, he pressed the call button on the bedside. By the time her attending physician came over, she had already adjusted her mood. She smiled at the attending doctor and secretly handed a red envelope to the doctor's palm. When the doctor was about to refuse, she spoke. "Dr. Li, don't rush to refuse. Listen to me first." Su Ruo just walked to the door of Ning Wan's ward holding a bundle of woolen ropes. Then I heard Ning Wan say this. Su Ruo took out a black card and gently inserted it into the crack of the door, and the door opened a crack silently. At first glance, she saw the doctor holding the red envelope, not knowing whether to put it down or take it. But Ning Wan continued to speak. "You also know that I am the girlfriend of Ji Yang from GU Group, right? I will become the young mistress of GU Group in the future. Actually, there is nothing important that I came to you for today. I just hope you can talk to Mr. GU and exaggerate the severity of my injury." Then I said, "I can't stand any stimulation in my current situation." Having said this, she looked at Dr. Li with a smile. Dr. Li felt very uneasy. Out of ethics as a doctor, he wanted to refuse. He had been in a lot of trouble these past few days. Obviously the woman wasn't injured, but Mr. Gu was extremely worried and thought she was about to die. Then just keep putting pressure on him. Now the real owner is putting pressure on him even more blatantly. He wanted to refuse, but he also knew that young Master Gu was too good to her. If she did something weird, he would be in big trouble. Just when he really didn't know what to do, there was a loud bang. The door was kicked open fiercely. The 2 people in the ward were frightened and looked towards the door. They saw the girl standing at the door, looking at them with a half smile. "Sorry to bother you." She said she was sorry, but in fact, she didn't look embarrassed at all. She strode into the ward and sat directly opposite Ning Wan. She said, "What are you talking about? Go on. You can ignore me." As she spoke, she threw the bundle of woolen ropes onto the sofa next to her. Wei Dong, who was not far away, was so shocked by this look that his eyelids twitched. I thought to myself that Miss Su Ruo was really becoming more and more like a bandit. Ning Wan was very angry. No matter who is planning something bad and is seen by the opponent, he will not be in a good mood. His fingers trembled as he pointed towards Su Ruo. Dr. Li saw that the situation was not good. He also knew some of the rumors about Ji Yang. Although he did not recognize Su Ruo, he just thought it was a matter of women being jealous. While the two women were not paying attention to him, he quickly left the ward. He had to tell Mr. Jiu about the situation here as soon as possible. Watching the doctor leave, Su Ruo leaned back lazily. Completely ignoring Ning Wan's frustrated expression, he remained nonchalant. Tell me, how bad is your character? Even your attending doctor won't help you. You still want to fight me? Why don't you kneel down, kowtow to me a few times and admit your mistake, and I will forgive you directly. Otherwise, you can't beat me. And I will double back on you for what you did to me. With a light tone, he spoke from the perspective of an absolute winner and a superior. It was as if Ning Wan was just an ant, not worth mentioning at all in front of Su Ruo. In addition, she knew everything that Ning Wan wanted to do and everything he had done. This was undoubtedly a humiliation, a merciless humiliation, and a deterrent to Ning Wan. How could she, who was so proud and arrogant, accept this? Ning Wan calmed down a bit, stood up, and tried to use his height advantage to suppress Su Ruo. Oh, Su Ruo, I'll say the same thing to you. As long as you kneel down and kowtow to me a few times, I will let you go. Otherwise, I will make you live a life worse than death. After all, the years I have lived abroad have not been lived in vain. I don't dare to return to China until I am completely sure. The most important thing is that I am the one who plays the role of the brother he loves. You are just a country girl with no background, what right do you have to fight with me? Su Ruo raised her eyebrows slightly and said with a smile. Just based on the first point, you are even more impatient than me, and you are easily affected by my emotions. Think about it, if I hadn't provoked you just now, would you have provoked me like this? Isn't your usual routine to do something shady behind people's backs? Because you are afraid that your actor brother will see your vicious side. So you try hard to pretend to be a weak little white flower. I am not afraid of anyone, so I can be vicious if I want to be vicious, I can be gentle if I want to be gentle, I can be green tea if I want to be green tea, I can be a little white flower if I want to be a little white flower tilde. So, you are inferior to me, right? Chapter 23. Who has ever shown mercy to her? Su Ruo spoke this in a light and gentle tone. He looked calm and composed. It was just like chatting with old friends. Even though she was sitting, she was still inferior to Ning Wan, who was standing in front of her, staring at her fiercely and was extremely excited. The difference is still obvious. Su Ruo continued to speak slowly, and after she said this, Ning Wan almost went crazy. Su Ruo said. Secondly, you lost in our first round. Although your injury was not serious, you still lost. Because you know what? On the night of your car accident, I was driving the Lamborghini that passed by you. I saw with my own eyes a huge white rock falling from the sky and hitting your Porsche hard. Then with a loud bang, your Porsche turns into pieces and your body is thrown into the air. Then I saw with my own eyes that you stretched out your hand and wanted to ask me for help, but I deliberately didn't save you. I drove away. So, who do you think will win the first round? Su Ruo finished speaking these words vividly. She finally felt relieved and a little better. Ning Wan suddenly shouted sharply, Su Ruo, it's you. It's you. I'm not done with you. The car accident that night actually did not cause much physical harm to her. But the psychological trauma to her was really great. Because she could clearly see a Lamborghini coming towards her from a distance. There are no other obstacles. But suddenly, with a loud bang and a huge force, her car disintegrated. He was driving normally, but suddenly the car broke into pieces, and his body was thrown into the air by a huge force and then fell down. No matter who it is, I'm afraid no one would be able to bear this scene. But Ning Wan had to bear it. What she told Dr. Li about her condition, that she couldn't stand any stimulation, was indeed true. But Su Ruo used this to provoke her. So in an instant, she lost all her rationality. He pounced toward Su Ruo with his fangs and claws. Su Ruo still said calmly, no, you can't hurt me. Then the legs are won. Ning Wan was basically like a broken sandbag, flying backwards, his body knocking over a lot of things, and finally he fell to the ground, lying there like a dead fish. This time, Su Ruo used his internal force, and the impact was much more severe than the car accident that night. Wei Dong became excited. In just 3 minutes, he had received 6 messages from Xiao Yi, telling him to take action when necessary and not to hurt his miracle doctor. It seems like he cares about the miracle doctor, but Wei Dong knows that Mr. Xiao's real thoughts are not that simple. Humph, he didn't believe what Master Xiao said about how strong Miss Su Ruo was, so now he wanted Master Xiao to see it for himself. Ning Wan didn't feel so well. She struggled for a long time but couldn't get up from the ground. But in terms of momentum, she still didn't want to back down. She glared at Su Ruo fiercely, as if she wanted to eat her. But Su Ruo had already slowly stood up and walked towards her. Standing in front of her, looking down at her, stepping on her fingers, smiling like an angel. In the 3rd round, you informed those black-hearted parents to bully me, but you don't know, you have your acting brother who has slept with countless people and loved countless people to protect you. I am also protected by my loyal, handsome and powerful brother Xiao. My brother Xiao is so strong that even 100 Gu Yangs can't compare to him tilde. So who's going to win the 3rd round? Don't be so angry, there's still the 4th round, and it's now. Don't you want Dr. Li to help you fake your medical condition? Since you are so eager to generate income for my hospital, I will oblige you. As Su Ruo spoke, she exerted force with her feet, and with the sound of crackling, Ning Wan's fingers broke one by one. The fingers are connected to their heart. Under the severe pain, Ning Wan could no longer maintain his tough appearance. He screamed and cried out in pain, let me go, Su Ruo, let me go. I'm afraid that at this moment, let alone asking Su Ruo to kneel down and kowtow for mercy, I'm afraid she would be asked to lick the back of her shoes. In life-threatening situations. She can do it, too. But Su Ruo didn't stop or hold back at all. She stepped on Ning Wan's fingers, palms, and wrists inch by inch. The smile on his face became more and more evil and weird. In the midst of the severe pain, Wan seemed to hear Su Ruo's devilish voice. Let you go? When she asked you for help and begged for mercy in the cold wind, did you let her go? On the night of the divorce, in the cold and windy night, the original owner Su Ruo walked out of Gu Yang's villa with a bank card worth 1 million yuan in her hand, wanting to go to Ning Wan's house to beg for forgiveness and apologize to her, and then stay away from them forever. But before he even reached her house, he was hit by her car. In Su Ruo's pleading eyes, she stepped on her wound and said viciously, "You got something you don't deserve, and you will be punished." When Su Ruo was in the hospital, her oxygen mask was almost taken off, all her money was taken away, and she was almost driven to death. Did she ever let her go? In order to take care of Su Ruo, her best friend was walking on the street at night and was attacked by gangsters. Her face was disfigured, her innocent body was trampled on, and she secretly had an abortion. Later, the scandal was exposed and she was forced to commit suicide. Did she ever let her go? The ex-boyfriend broke up with his family completely for Su Ruo, and finally was defeated and died by the ice blade. Did she ever let her go? Su Ruo in the original book was a complete tragedy, and even her friends and her boyfriend ended up in tragedy because of her. It all started because Ji Yang relied on his status and position to rob and plunder. It was all because Ning Wan was jealous of Su Ruo for having accompanied Ji Yang for 3 years and easily obtaining a status that she had tried her best to never obtain. When they are planning their strategies, when they are chatting and laughing without caring about the lives of others. When the weak are trampled upon. Who has ever thought about letting the weak girl go? Who has ever thought about the stormy waves that their evil deeds would stir up on other people's lives? Who has ever shown mercy? Who has ever shown mercy? No, nothing at all. Scene after scene from the book, which were originally the plots in the book, flashed through Su Ruo's mind and before her eyes. But because she accepted the original owner's memories, those things seemed to be experienced by her, and those emotions seemed to be possessed by her. Deep in a pair of strange eyes, a terrifying storm whirlpool surged up one after another. Facing these eyes at this moment, I am afraid no one would doubt that this beautiful girl has murderous intentions. Wei Dong stood outside the ward in a daze, not daring to make any move. Miss Su Ruo is so scary. He was afraid that if he made some noise, Miss Su Ruo would kill him as well. Xiao Yi looked at Su Ruo's eyes through the tablet screen, and his ears were filled with her repeated calls of "my brother Xiao." He didn't know what was in his mind, and he actually stood up and walked towards Su Ruo's ward. Chapter 24. Time stops at this moment. Xiao Yi just felt that Su Ruo's eyes were carrying too many things. Those things made him feel uncomfortable. Ning Wan, who was facing Su Ruo's cold aura, had completely lost his voice and felt as if his soul had been sucked away by Su Ruo's eyes. Su Ruo slowly leaned down, and with this one movement, the fingers, back of her hand, wrist, forearm, of her other hand were also crushed by Su Ruo's leg. But she didn't even dare to scream. She could only watch as Su Ruo approached her and scratched her cheek with her fingernails, and the cool air blew all over her face. "You deserve to die, but I won't let you die. Because I know how to make you suffer more than death." Su Ruo said this, stood up, and distanced himself from Ning Wan. She went to get the woolen rope that she had thrown aside, and Ning Wan finally found her soul and shouted, Help, help my brother, help me, RR. She was just trying to attract other people's attention with such movements. But she had no idea that the surrounding area had already been under martial law by Xiao Yi's men. So she shouted for a long time, and what she got was that Su Ruo put a rope around her, then picked her up and pushed her towards the windowsill. Ning Wan only felt her body suspended in the air for a while, and looking at Su Ruo's madness at this moment, it was obvious that he was going to push her down. She was terrified and begged for mercy, grabbing the window frame and shouting loudly, "Brother Yang, help me! Help me! Su Ruo, please let me go, please let me go." Su Ruo didn't say let go nor didn't say not to let go. While checking the rope, she pushed her body outwards again and again. He looked like he was having a lot of fun. Ningguan's attending physician, Dr. Li, still notified Ji Yang. He always felt that Su Ruo had bad intentions, and Ning Wan was indeed deeply loved by Ji Yang. If something happened to Ning Wan, he was afraid that he would not be able to complete his mission. In order to find Su Ruo, Ji Yang was not far from a hospital. Hearing that Wanwan was going to be bullied, he rushed over quickly. As soon as I walked out of the elevator, I heard Ningguan's screams for help. He was so frightened that he ran wildly and shouted, "Wanwan, wait a minute, I'm coming. Because I care, I lose control." Wanwan is the woman he loves the most, even though he knew 3 years ago that the purpose of Wanwan's leaving might not be so pure, even though he knew that Wanwan's leaving for 3 years might not be so pure. However, he always remembered Wanwan's original appearance, so gentle and so beautiful. Therefore, he wanted to use all his love in his life to protect her and indulge her. This was the first time I heard Wanwan so desperate and helpless. How could he bear it? He even threw away his own face and shouted like a madman. But when he rushed into the ward and slammed the door open, when he saw Wanwan sitting on the windowsill, her face was covered with snot and tears due to excessive fright. Her face was distorted and hideous like a female ghost, and her long hair was flying like a madman. For a moment he didn't recognize that such an ugly person was Wanwan. Instead, he saw the girl who he had been thinking about since yesterday. She still stood by the window so beautifully. Her long hair fell down her back, making her figure look even more feminine and beautiful. Especially when she glanced slightly to the side, one could see a little bit of her extremely fair skin from the side, which was even more arousing. So, I came to save Wanwan with a heart full of anger. Unexpectedly, when he saw Su Ruo's back, he was stunned. Moreover, they met by chance several times in just 2 days. He didn't believe that they were not destined to meet. He walked towards the ward step by step, wanting to reach out and put his arm around the pretty girl's shoulders, but he was afraid that being too abrupt would displease her. I could only stand a little distance away from the pretty girl, looking at her back, and spoke carefully. "Miss, is there anything I can help you with?" Time stops at this moment. Ning Wan stopped screaming and begging for mercy, staring blankly at Ji Yang's opening and closing red lips. Su Ruo raised her eyebrows again and smiled. Wei Dong covered his face and wondered if there was any hope for him being so blind. Xiao Yi walked to the door of the ward and paused. He looked at Su Ruo's back with a dangerous look. He wanted to see if this woman had the same attitude towards other men as him. An attitude of flirting, both overt and covert. In the silence, Su Ruo played with the rope in her palm and turned her head little by little. Ji Yang's breathing slowly stopped. As he looked at the beautiful girl turning her head, his palms began to tremble, his arms began to tremble, and his whole body began to tremble. For the first time in his life, he felt such strong anticipation that his heart almost stopped beating. A few seconds of short time was stretched infinitely at this moment, as if it were a century. I saw it. I finally saw it. Beautiful. It's really beautiful. The ultimate beauty. Breathtaking beauty. Only. Why is this beauty so familiar? Just when Su Ruo turned her head completely and looked at Ji Yang. Looking at the smiling face in front of him, Ji Yang finally felt familiar. When Su Ruo opened her pink and red lips slightly, she uttered the first sentence. Ji Yang's body shook violently and he staggered violently. A look of extreme fear and disbelief finally appeared in his eyes. He stared at Su Ruo as if he had seen a ghost. He just stretched out his hand and pointed at Su Ruo. You are Su Ruo. You are actually Su Ruo. As for what Su Ruo had just said, he completely ignored it. Su Ruo can actually laugh, and her laugh is so beautiful. Su Ruo is so beautiful. She is the most beautiful in the world. He actually fell in love with Su Ruo at first sight, such a deep love. Ji Yang felt like he was going crazy and dying. Everything was a mess, completely messed up. His mind was now in a mess and he couldn't think clearly about anything. Su Ruo just said, "If you want to help me push her down." But Ji Yang didn't hear it at all, and Su Ruo was a little unhappy. He kicked Ji Yang fiercely and kicked him out of the ward, saying coldly, "Oh, if you don't want to help, don't get in my way here." After kicking Ji Yang away, Su Ruo turned around and looked at Ning Wan again. Ning Wan was completely dumbfounded at this moment. Ning Wan just stared at Ji Yang blankly. Looking at her staring at Ji Yang blankly, looking at the way Ji Yang was actually staring at Su Ruo, ignoring everything around him, including her, with a heartless look. Ning Wan still felt like she was in a dream. Su Ruo's red lips curved up, and the two dimples were really beautiful. Looking at Ning Wan, he added, "You lost again this round. The brother Yang you relied on never even looked at you. He can't save you." As he spoke, Su Ruo's expression became increasingly cold and indifferent. He stared into Ning Wan's eyes and spoke word by word. "You can choose to continue receiving treatment in my hospital or transfer to another hospital, but remember, no matter what, you must pay me all the money for your hospitalization. If you still want to be a freeloader by relying on Ji Yang, I will kill you." In the past, it was Ji Yang's hospital and he provided her with the best medical resources. Now that the hospital belongs to her, Su Ruo, she has to pay the bill. After Su Ruo finished speaking, she stretched out her hand and pushed, and half of Ning Wan's body was suspended in the air. Before Ning Wan screamed, Su Ruo's devilish voice was heard. "You said it, your injuries are serious and you can't stand the psychological stimulation. I will help you." After saying that, he used his hands to forcefully throw Ning Wan straight down. She satisfied her. Hearing Ning Wan's desperate scream and looking at her hanging in the air and spinning continuously, Su Ruo's smile became even more enchanting. It is expected that after this experience of flying high in the sky, she will really be unable to withstand any stimulation in the future. After doing all this, Su Ruo clapped her hands, turned around and was about to walk out. Chapter 25 Mr. Xiao, you are more handsome than I thought. When Su Ruo turned around, she saw Xiao Yi at a glance. It was not the pale-faced Xiao Yi lying on the bed, but the Xiao Yi who not only stood up but also walked towards her. Xiao Yi lying on the bed was so handsome that it made all women's hearts stop beating. Then when she really stood up, moving her long and powerful legs, with her aura fully open and her eyes focused on the man walking towards her. At this moment, Su Ruo felt that it would not hurt even if she overturned the world for him. In an instant, she finally understood what it meant to be extremely beautiful. After a brief moment of suffocation, Xiao Yi finally walked in front of her, lowered his eyes slightly and looked at her. His eyes were deep and his true meaning could not be seen. Su Ruo looked at this face and felt the strong and rich masculine aura enveloping her. How could she care about what he was thinking? She raised her head slightly, looked at Xiao Yi, put her left hand on Xiao Yi's shoulder, and gently touched the corner of Xiao Yi's eye with her right hand. She smiled brightly in an instant. "Master Xiao, you are more handsome than I thought." As she spoke, her glowing red lips instantly moved closer to Xiao Yi's cheek. When Xiao Yi saw the girl's beautiful smile suddenly appeared, his mind went blank for a moment. At this moment, he had to believe that fox spirits really existed in the world and that fox spirits could really seduce men's souls. He felt his soul leave his body in an instant. No, I'm afraid it has already left my body. Otherwise, why would he come to this woman? Otherwise, why didn't he push her away when he saw her lips approaching his face, but instead pinched her waist in revenge? The touch of his palm was thinner and softer than he had imagined. But he still showed no mercy, pinched her hard, with a warning look in his eyes. When the pain in his waist came, Su Ruo was not annoyed or afraid. Instead, the light in his eyes became several degrees brighter. Even with a sense of mischief, her red lips brushed across Xiao Yi's cheek very lightly, leaving behind a very shallow and ambiguous red mark. Then, Su Ruo's warm and light breath, like a feather, gently brushed Xiao Yi's ears and reached his heart. Su Ruo said, "Master Xiao, you are so handsome now, I really want to kiss you. Then I will lock you up at home and never let you out for the rest of your life." Xiao Yi suddenly exerted force with his palm and pressed Su Ruo's body, which was so delicate that it would break if bent, into his arms. An extremely dangerous and fierce voice sounded in Su Ruo's ears at the same time, "You can try and see who breaks whose wings first." Su Ruo leaned on Xiao Yi's shoulder and smiled, but there was danger in the corners of her eyebrows and eyes. Xiao Yi's embrace and strength made her more obsessed than she had imagined. She gently stroked Xiao Yi's shoulders with her fingers, and continued to breathe softly, "I can't bear to do something, can you bear to do it?" He. As she spoke, she suddenly exerted force with her hands, directly distanced herself from Xiao Yi, looked at him, and smiled like a fairy. Yes, she wanted to hug him, wanted to be hugged by him, wanted to kiss him, and wanted to do things with him that only the closest people in the world were qualified to do. But now is not the time. Just stop at the right time, otherwise what if you scare him away? Xiao Yi felt the warmth in his arms fade away. He was unwilling to admit that for the first time he felt a touch of violence because of the loss. But seeing that Su Ruo looked like a cat that had successfully stolen some fish, he knew that he couldn't be too far away from this woman, nor too close, nor too much, nor could he ignore her. If you don't control the degree well, she will ride on your head in a domineering manner if you are not careful. After making sure that she would not suffer any loss, he snorted coldly and walked out. When he saw Ji Yang at the door, his expression was ferocious and his eyes were almost popping out. Xiao Yi glanced at Su Ruo and snorted coldly, "Don't play yourself to death." Anyone could tell from this cold snort that it was light and did not carry much weight, and it even contained a hint of indescribable good mood. Wei Dong thought of how Xiao Yi approached with a seemingly angry look just now, but ever since Xiao Yi saw Su Ruo kick Ji Yang out of the door, Ji Yang was unable to get up for a long time. Others may not know, but Wei Dong knows that Xiao Yi is in a good mood, very good. Those who are in a good mood will take the initiative to hug the girl's waist. Especially when the two of them hugged each other just now, neither of them knew it, but Wei Dong saw it clearly. Miss Su Ruo's ex-husband had a really dark complexion, which was even uglier than kicking him out. Staring at the two people hugging each other, he seemed to want to kill someone. Isn't he it? Ji Yang is very angry now, super angry, quite angry. He was so angry that he forgot for a moment that his real purpose of coming here was to save his baby Wanwan. From the moment he saw Su Ruo's back, he forgot everything. In his eyes, there was only Su Ruo, the smart Su Ruo, the smiling Su Ruo, the Su Ruo who dared to kick him and the Su Ruo who dared to cuckold him in front of him. He struggled to stand up from the ground, staring at Su Ruo leaning on the man's shoulder, staring at the man putting his arm around Su Ruo's waist. The handsome man and beautiful woman snuggle up to each other, they look like a match made in heaven. As soon as he opened his mouth, he wanted to roar and take action. But, before he made any move, the man holding Su Ruo seemed to have seen through his intentions and glanced at him indifferently. Just with this one glance, he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Even his throat and body were frozen. He could not make a sound or move. It's scary, this man's eyes are so scary. So, when Xiao Yi finally let go of Su Ruo and walked towards the door, he watched the faint red mark on Xiao Yi's cheek. It was a faint red mark in the shape of Su Ruo's lips. He didn't dare to react any more. She could only feel the man's gaze pressing down on her like a huge mountain, and listen to the man's warning to Su Ruo, which seemed fierce but actually had no weight. Then he saw Su Ruo also walking towards him. The hem of her skirt drew a beautiful arc in the air, and when her long hair fluttered, her appearance became even more stunning and beautiful. But at this moment, the beautiful face was facing Xiao Yi's silhouette, and the beautiful voice was also directed at Xiao Yi. "You're leaving soon, so why should I play? I'll go with you, right?" Then, she followed Xiao Yi, walked out of the ward, walked into the corridor, and continued walking towards the elevator. Throughout the whole process, she had the brightest and most dazzling smile on her face, but throughout the whole process, she never glanced at Ji Yang. Just like 3 years ago, her beautiful smile blossomed for her first love, that poor college student. 3 years later, her smile bloomed again for this terrible man. In 3 years, he tried everything, but he couldn't make her smile for him. Ji Yang stared at the two people who passed by him, and then left their backs behind as they walked away. He suddenly became so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 26: The Temptation of a $1 Billion Dowry. The moment the blood spurted out, Ji Yang's body also shook violently. His eyes were darkening and he felt dizzy, and it was obvious that he could not hold on any longer. As his consciousness gradually faded, he heard the screams of people around him. His eyes were fixed on Su Ruo's back. His vomited blood, his in such a miserable state, will she look back? Even in his blurred consciousness, he couldn't help but open his mouth and shouted, "Su Ruo, Xiao Ruo." I don't know if it was his voice or the prayer in his heart that worked. As his consciousness became increasingly blurred, he finally saw Su Ruo turning around, and a beautiful, glowing face finally faced him. He was delighted and moved towards Su Ruo tremblingly, holding onto the wall. His vision was becoming increasingly blurred. He did not see the disgust in Su Ruo's eyes, but he heard Su Ruo's voice clearly in his ears. "Hey, you freeloader, if you want to see a doctor in my hospital, you have to pay for it and pay all the money you have paid for your past medical treatments. Or I'll just order someone to throw you out, do you understand? Also, if you don't quickly draft an agreement that satisfies me and give it to me, don't blame me for being rude to you." After Su Ruo finished speaking, she quickened her pace and walked into the elevator. In the elevator, Xiao Yi was waiting for her. Su Ruo's words were undoubtedly like a huge rock, hitting Ji Yang's chest hard. He was already on the verge of collapse, and he was so angry that he spit out blood. Then his eyes went dark and he collapsed completely. Wei Dong and a group of Xiao Yi's men witnessed this scene with their own eyes. They looked in the direction where Su Ruo left, and couldn't help feeling fearful. Only Miss Su Ruo can make a person so angry that he spit blood and faint with just a few words. In order to avoid suffering the same fate as Ji Yang, they bypassed Ji Yang, who was lying on the ground, and left quickly. Not until Xiao Yi and his men left did the corridor return to silence again. Dr. Li, who had called to inform Ji Yang to come over, finally dared to walk out of the office and towards this side. Seeing Ji Yang's unconscious look, he was so scared that his body shook involuntarily. He quickly contacted the medical team to come and treat Ji Yang. When Ji Yang was sent to the emergency room, Dr. Li realized that the purpose of calling Ji Yang here was actually Ning Wan. So where is Ning Wan now? Dr. Li walked into the ward puzzledly, looked around but couldn't find Ning Wan. When he saw the open window, he suddenly remembered the scream he had heard before, and he walked towards the window with a trembling body. There is a bold idea in my mind that I dare not confirm. But he still boldly went to the window and looked out. The moment he saw the scene outside the window, he was so scared that he couldn't help but take a deep breath, and then he quickly started calling for help. Because he saw with his own eyes that Ning Wan was hanging outside the window by a rope as if dead, his face was as pale as paper, and his eyes were tightly closed. Apparently he fainted from fright. From below, a foul smell wafted up. Looking at the marks on Ning Wan's pants, it was not difficult to imagine where the smell came from. Su Ruo would not ask about what happened after his death. Anyway, she has both heavy and light cases under her control. When she followed Xiao Yi out of the hospital and saw Xiao Yi going to the parking lot, she remembered that the Lamborghini she got from Ji Yan was also in the parking lot, so she followed Xiao Yi for a while. Xiao Yi is not a talkative person, and Su Ruo didn't want to push Xiao Yi too hard, so she didn't say anything. The two of them were going to cross the garden behind the hospital, just walking quietly, and there was an indescribable comfortable atmosphere between them. Just as we turned the corner and headed towards the parking lot, the sudden sound of quarreling in front of them made Su Ruo and Xiao Yi stop involuntarily. The female voice asked, "Are we just going to leave like this?" The man said, "What if I don't leave? My teeth are broken and I don't dare to go back. That man is too scary. Didn't you see he has bodyguards?" The woman said, "But I can't bear to leave like this. My arm is all bruised from the fall, and I don't know where the gold teeth I made 2 years ago have gone. Who will accompany me if I leave like this?" Who else could these two people be but Su Ruo's parents Zhang Erhuer and Su Daong? The two of them were originally instigated by Ning Wan because they heard that Su Ruo had hooked up with a new rich man. Thinking back to 3 years ago, when they first handed Su Ruo over to South City's richest man, Jiu Jiren, they received a betrothal gift of 10 million. With 10 million, they not only bought a house in the city, but also wore gold and silver, and truly experienced the happiness of being rich. But 3 years have passed and the 10 million had long been squandered, even the gold, silver, and jewelry had been pawned. They may even have to sell their house because their son is short of money due to gambling debts. But at this time, I heard that Su Ruo was going to remarry. They asked for 10 million last time, and they don't want more this time when they are remarrying. 20 million should be fine. But who knew that they were scared away before they even opened their mouths? Thinking about it now, I always feel that I was too cowardly and too unwilling to accept it. Old woman, do you remember? That man just said that he would need 10 billion to marry that dead woman. Just think about it, how much money is 10 billion? Zhang Erhuer said, 10 million will allow us to live an upper-class life, with a lot of benefits. I don't think we can spend it all in this lifetime. By then, we will be rich. Sun Daong said, but he wants to take us to do a paternity test. If we don't do the paternity test, we won't get the 10 billion. What should we do? The two fell silent again. After a while, I finally heard Zhang Erhuer say harshly, "We can't do a paternity test, even if we die, but we can get the 10 billion betrothal gift." Let me think about it, let me think about it. Got it, we'll wait outside the hospital every day, and then we'll track down that damn woman Su Ruo, and then when no one is around, we'll tie her up, okay with that? Zhang Erhuer's voice suddenly rose and she looked at Su Daong with great joy. When Su Daong heard Zhang Erhuer say this, he thought about the situation and nodded. Then we have to do it as soon as possible, preferably tonight. Otherwise, I know that those rich people will arrange bodyguards. If we act too late, they will assign bodyguards to that dead woman. I am afraid that we will not only not get the money, but also suffer. Yes, let's go guard it now, quickly. Su Ruo heard a series of clattering sounds and saw two people walking towards her from the turning in front. Xiao Yi's gaze was already directed at her at this moment, and if she was not mistaken in the look in his eyes, he was asking her if she needed help. Su Ruo shook her head, her lips curved into an impeccable arc, and she took a step forward. After all, these were her father and mother who raised her. She must make her most beautiful smile become their most lingering nightmare. However, 3 seconds later, Su Daong and Zhang Erhuer appeared in Su Ruo's sight. The two of them dared to plot evil here because there was no one here. Chapter 27, Can we capture Su Ruo and take her hostage? But the two of them never imagined that when they finished their conspiracy and came out, they actually saw not only people outside. Moreover, looking at this person's appearance. Zhang Erhuer couldn't help but scream out in surprise, and took a step back, staring at Su Ruo, terrified as if she had seen a ghost. Su Daong was a little calmer than Zhang Erhuer. He pointed his finger at Su Ruo and looked at the weird smile on her face, although his heart sank. But he still asked bravely, "When did you come?" Su Ruo lifted her long hair, her smile deepened, and she walked towards the couple. "Me? I came neither too early nor too late, and I just happened to hear your conspiracy word for word. So, you want to kidnap me and threaten my brother Xiao? Why don't you ask my brother Xiao if he agrees?" As she spoke, the two men took a step back, and when she finished speaking, they couldn't help but look behind her. The moment they met Xiao Yi's eyes, which were scarier than a devil's, the couple could no longer hold on. Two plops. He fell straight to the ground, threatening to throw himself on the ground and yelling, go away, don't come over here. Xiao Ruo, you misunderstood. That's not what we meant, no. Su Ruo looked at the two people falling together, and burst out laughing. He looked down at the two people and said cheerfully, Hee, look how scared you are. I won't eat you, why are you so scared? When Su Ruo asked back, a hint of doubt flashed through their minds. Yes, what are they afraid of? It was obvious that they were the ones who bullied this dead woman in the past, and she had never been afraid of anything. This dead woman just said a few words casually today, why are they scared? But they didn't even have time to sort out these thoughts. As soon as the two of them met Su Ruo's eyes and looked at her smile, they couldn't help but become distracted. It was a fear that arose out of nowhere. The two of them could only shake their heads. No, no, no. As for what they are not doing, they themselves don't know. Su Ruo's clear and lively laughter sounded again. He, don't be so scared. I am your daughter. You still want to tie me up and threaten my daughter. You're so scared, it makes me sad tilder. The couple looked at Su Ruo's dazzling smile and listened to her giggles. Their eyes became more and more confused and their minds became more and more confused. Until Su Daong finally lost control and slapped Zhang Erhuer in the face. Su Ruo, don't blame Dad. It wasn't Dad's idea. It was this stinky woman. It was her. Zhang Erhuer also went crazy and stretched out her hand to scratch Su Daong's face, shouting. It was you, a jerk, who targeted Su Ruo and instigated me to come here. If you dare to wrongly accuse me, I will beat you to death. Crazy woman, let me go, or I will be rude to you. You idiot, I'm going to kill you. Su Ruo just smiled and said a few words casually. The couple started fighting wildly and uncontrollably. Judging from the situation, if no one came to separate the two, they would probably fight until the end of time. Looking again, the instigator had now lifted his long hair, quietly shifted his gaze away from the two people, put away his weird smile, and then quietly distanced himself from the two people who were beating him. Xiao Yi witnessed the scene in front of him, his eyes flickering again, and a cool curve appeared on his lips at this moment. He had heard long ago that there was a very mysterious island isolated from the world on the other side of the ocean, and that the people on the island all had extremely terrifying special abilities. For example, martial arts are unique, and the Taoist yin yang and bagua are unique. But all of these are no match for one thing: mind control. That is, hypnosis. Whenever the person who knows the art of mind control makes a move, the person whose mind is controlled will lose his or her own will and will follow the caster's instructions. The original Xiao Yi didn't believe these. He doesn't think there are such strange things in the world. But at this moment, he had to believe it. He even thought about his abnormal behavior today. He knew that the woman in front of him was poisonous and he should stay away from her, but he still did so much. I'm afraid they are all distracted. He had been worried about her being so weak and felt sorry for him. The curve of Xiao Yi's lips became increasingly cold. When Su Ruo's gaze was about to look at Xiao Yi, he lowered his eyes slightly, walked around Su Ruo, and walked towards the luxury car not far ahead. A faint voice fell into Su Ruo's ears. If you think of anything in the future, you can contact Wei Dong through WeChat. When the sound stops, the person has gone far away. Su Ruo thought that Xiao Yi had some urgent business, so she responded with an okay and continued to observe the couple's quarrel. Since Xiao Yi was gone, she had nothing to worry about, and she fanned the flames even more in a seductive tone, and the fight between the couple became even more ferocious. Zhang Erhuer made up her mind, opened her mouth and bit Su Daong's ear. If Su Daong had not dodged quickly, his ear would have been bitten off. Even so, blood was still flowing out. Su Daong was so angry that he bit Zhang Erhuer's nose fiercely. Not only was Su Ruo not afraid, but her smile became even more cheerful, and she was almost clapping her hands in applause. Thinking of the memories of the original owner left in her mind, it was so painful. Even though the original owner's soul had left this body, she still felt pain in her heart when she saw the couple. So now it's natural to vent this emotion. This time, because she was disturbed by some emotions that belonged to the original owner in her heart, she did not notice that Xiao Yi not far away had not actually left. Xiao Yi had clearly decided to leave, but for some unknown reason, he couldn't help but look towards Su Ruo while sitting in the car. After seeing Su Ruo's completely evil appearance, mumbling something to himself while sitting next to him, the couple became even crazier. He has mastered the human heart and human nature to the extreme. He couldn't help but think about it and felt terrified. Finally, he withdrew his gaze with difficulty and said to Wei Dong, who was driving in front. From now on, you can only talk to Su Ruo via text, not video or voice. Otherwise, he was afraid that this woman would still control Wei Dong. Wei Dong had witnessed how close the two were before, so he was so happy to receive this request. Okay. As you command. Master Xiao finally becomes possessive of the girl. He doesn't allow anyone else to get close to his girl or she will be jealous. This is great. The car started slowly and went farther and farther away from Su Ruo, but Xiao Yi couldn't help but look back. But Wei Dong suddenly seemed to have thought of something, and said seriously, Master Xiao, we have already found out who hurt you this time. The man who escaped before is from the ancient martial arts family on the mysterious island. He is hiding now and we can't find him. But if we fight him head on, we are no match for him. Master Xiao, what do you think should be done next? Xiao Yi, can we capture Su Ruo as a hostage and then use that to threaten the mysterious island? After all, I heard that people who can read minds are at the top of the pyramid in that mysterious island.